that's us then if we end open session. Okay, good afternoon members and welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. So I'll deal with housekeeping first and then we may have to do an immediate pause. I think the intention is to try and get a photograph of as many members of the committee as we can. It's a timely reminder to members to be on time and you wouldn't miss these things. Housekeeping first. Advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and advise anyone in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. And I would remind anyone in the public gallery and all individuals in the room it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So I think we'll cover apologies and then we'll try and get our photographs. So item 1 is apologies. I'm not aware of any apologies and I'm not aware of any remote attendances unless anything's come through.
Just got 2 remote attendances.
Okay, so that would be Cara and John attending remotely. So no other apologies then noted. So I will just ask if we can just very briefly turn off the live feed. I know it's right at the start, just so we can get our photograph and then we'll go from there.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound.
Live feed is back on. Apologies for anyone joining the meeting and watching online for that brief interruption. Was purely a photograph, no business conducted. Item 2 on the agenda is chairperson's business. Just one item from me, and I think it pops up in correspondence later as well. I think it is just to note, obviously, a significant development in the education system that the trade unions, the teaching trade unions, have gone out to ballot their members on strike action, and I think everyone in the committee will have felt for some time that we were moving into that space, given the ongoing challenges around workload issues and the concerns that we've heard evidence on in this committee around the system feeling overwhelmed with the pace and scale of change in the education system at the minute. I think it may be unlikely that we'll hear from the unions directly at this time, as it is really now into that democratic process within the trade unions themselves to make their decision on the ballot, and the committee will obviously respect that process and let that run. But I would hope all parties around the table would agree that we would want to see a resolution that fully addresses the concerns of teachers. So I would want to propose that we write to the Minister urging him to ensure there is ongoing engagement and to take action to address the concerns that teachers are highlighting in relation to workload, and I think around the clear reassurances that they obviously require that the implementation of the independent review of teacher workload will be substantive, it will be meaningful, and it will be delivered at pace. There does appear to me to be a clear breakdown of trust in the system, and I think their steps need to be taken to repair that. So I hope members are agreed that we get that correspondence away and to note the committee's concern about the breakdown in relationship, and I think to urge the Minister to do all he can to address those issues that teachers, through their unions and in direct contact to us, have been raising now for some time with members. So are we agreed on that action at the table? Members are agreed? Okay. That takes us to item 3 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have an interest they wish to declare in relation to today's agenda? Not at this stage. If that should change, obviously indicate and it can be noted. Item 4 is matters arising. I hope that this can be, there's quite a few items on here, but I hope that we can get through them quickly. So I would refer members to the email from Corlia de Gael Scoiliachta at page 7 regarding the RAISE briefing that the committee received on the 29th of April 2026. There is at page 8 of your table papers a draft response to that email. Are members content to agree that response? Agreed? They would also just refer members to a memo from the Bills Office in respect of a typographical change to the committee bill. Are members content to note that also in your table papers? Are we agreed? Agreed. Then at page 14 of the pack, it's a copy of the Early Language Support for Every Child programme interim evaluation report provided by the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists on the back of their briefing to committee last week. So happy to open up for any comments, but would propose at this stage that we note if members are agreed. Agreed. And then I would refer members to the memo from the clerk following the informal meeting on Monday with the Benedict Blythe Foundation at page 3 of tabled papers. So look, obviously it was a plenary day and a very busy plenary day, so fully appreciate members weren't able to attend. Thanks to Cathy, who was able to get to that meeting. I would like to put on record my thanks to the witnesses for attending the meeting. Their briefing was excellent. It was clear, short, to the point, thoroughly well researched and crystal clear, I think, in terms of their asks of committee. So I would like to seek members' agreement on a straightforward action at this stage. So specifically in terms of the campaign around introducing Benedict's Law here in Northern Ireland, I would want to suggest that we do raise that directly with both the Ministers for Education and Health. And look, I suspect we have done so before, but I think it would be appropriate to just emphasise that we have now heard directly from the campaign group, and with that launch of the National Allergy Strategy, which went live this week as well, that it would be very helpful, I think, to get a clear steer as to whether there is scope or appetite for legislative change. I also wanted to suggest, and this came up in the meeting, and I'm not sure if it was after you left, Cathy, but I think possibly you were there, the scope for potentially a committee motion around this. I think there's clearly cross-departmental working that could be undertaken by the Education and Health Ministers, certainly to encompass the potential for bringing in Benedict's Law here in Northern Ireland, but also around a wider engagement and a clear agreed pathway forward in terms of ensuring that our schools and also in terms of all those health interventions are required are places that are as safe as possible for children with allergies, both those that are diagnosed and not. The evidence that we heard was that a child who has an allergy but may not yet be diagnosed, that other than the home, the school is the most likely place they will have that allergic reaction. So our schools really must be set up and ready to deal with that eventuality, and teachers properly trained, EpiPens available, and clear policies. So I would hope this is something all members would be able to get behind. So not suggesting we start any substantive work on a motion at this stage, but after recess I would like to suggest that we do hear perhaps from the National Allergy Strategy Group, who I understand would be very keen to work with committee around preparing a motion with some specific asks that we could hopefully bring to the floor of the Assembly if we're agreed. Cathy?
Yeah, just a really small point, Chair, because I think you've covered it all there, that this is something that, is quite non-controversial, and it is something that I think we all could agree upon. But I think something that was really stark the other day was it highlighted again that lack of education and health working together on it. It's very clear that they need to be, and you outlined it there around school being the most likely place that this is going to happen. And I thought it was stark when I think it was Helen herself had mentioned that they'd went to the trusts around the training. It seemed to be that the EA were pushing it onto the trusts, and then the trusts were pushing it back onto the EA around training for schools, because ultimately for teachers this is and school leaders and our classroom assistants, as we know, are dealing with a lot of this. It's a real heavy responsibility that they have without the adequate training for it. So I think it's another instance just of health and education just needing to come together but don't seem to be able to. So I think it definitely involves both, whatever we're doing here.
No, absolutely, and that is a really good point. I think on the back of the briefing, just that sense that we have the EA, we're pushing everything that we rely on the trust to deliver the training, and the trusts the figures were tiny in terms of any training delivered. Some had delivered none, and some actually said we don't do this anymore. So it really was not a reassuring picture that was painted there. So I agree, we should be taking that forward. So look, I think we have agreement around the table if we're content to dispose of that item. Okay, so that concludes matters arising. That takes us on to item 5, which is draft minutes. I would refer members to the draft minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 27th of May 2026 at page 101. And I would just seek members' agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Is that agreed?
Right.
Agreed, yeah.
No, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers. Okay, item 6 on the agenda there then. So this is part of our ongoing review into SEND provision. Officially, our evidence sessions have closed, but I think it would be appropriate for this session to be heard with that in mind. And it's a briefing from Caleb's Cause NI. If you want to bring the witnesses through, I would refer members to a briefing note from the clerk at page 112 and correspondence from Caleb's Cause at page 114. We'll just let the members get seated. I don't think our witnesses will need much introduction. Joining us today we have Alma White.
Hi, sweetie.
Hi, lovely to see you. How are you? All good. That's great to have you here. So we have Alma White from Caleb's Cause. We have Caleb White, who is a pupil. We have Karen Ryan, a parent, also representing Caleb's Cause, and Emily Ryan, a pupil. So we'll just let the witnesses get seated and we'll make a start. I just let you get yourself settled. Alma, no, you don't need to apologise at all. It's brilliant to have you all here. I think everyone around the table here is very familiar with Caleb's Cause and your campaign, and I think it's been a privilege for all of us to engage with your campaign, Alma, and I think it's great in particular today to have two young people who are profoundly impacted by the issues in relation to your campaign in terms of transitions and that post-19 support that does or does not exist and the lack of legislative underpinning, but no doubt you will set all of that out, and I'm looking forward also to hearing from both Caleb and Emily today. So you're very, very welcome. I don't plan to do any more preamble than to hand over to yourselves for any initial remarks or presentation you want to make, and then we'll move into question and answer. So over to yourselves.
So, we're here today. We're very excited. We think the stars of the show will definitely outshine us, being Caleb and Emily. Caleb is going to speak first, and then Karen's going to make a statement after that. So hopefully we'll get through this okay and I won't cry. So, okay, Caleb. So you're going to big voice, okay? Speak into the microphone.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I'm here to be seen and have my say. My mum loves when I read out loud. Hearing my voice makes her also proud. But what would you do if you had no voice? If nobody listened to your choice? If every step along your way meant fighting harder every day? For many young people this is true, a daily battle they have to go through, not because they lack a dream, but because the world is not as fair as it seems. Some doors are closed, some chances few, some paths are harder to walk through. Families struggle, wait and fight, just to access what is right. If I had just 3 wishes, I would change the world for us. I'd build a place where all belong, where every voice heard and strong. My first wish would be equity, a fair world for all to be, not less, not more. But what we need to grow, to learn, to thrive, succeed. My second wish would help us see the strength in every disability, to look beyond what meets the eye, and to help each young person reach for the sky. My third wish would be for care, for kindness, hope and a chance fair, a place where no one stands alone, and every young person can find their home. In Northern Ireland, far too often, dreams are made and yet forgotten. Young people wait while the years go by, still I simply, why not I? Why should support be hard to find? Why should inclusion fall behind? Why should the young person have to prove they're worthy of a chance to move? Caleb's Cause here to say that things can change in that way. A future brighter than before, with open hearts and open doors. So let us listen, let us care, and build a world that's truly fair. A world where every young person can see their worth, their hope, their destiny. Because every voice deserves to sing, every dream deserves its wings. and when we stand as one, we'll see a future shaped by equity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb.
I was going to leave with his dad.
Okay, if I could just say, it's not easy for anybody to come into a committee and speak to a room full of people. So it's so well done, Caleb, and we really, really do value hearing your voice today. Thank you. Karen, if you're going to speak next, happy to hand over to you.
Astounding, isn't it?
It really is.
Both Caleb and Emily are predominantly non-verbal, you know, but to be able to read that poem, that blows me away. And Emily could sing every word to A Million Dreams before she could say hello, Mum. So it's very much. We've put statements on the desk. You probably saw us laying those out. Now Caleb's gone. Just details. We'll come back to this as I speak. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Karen and I speak on behalf of Emily, who's 17 and she has 2 years left in education at Parkview Special School in Lisbon. For the last 10 years I have been on their fundraising committee, Friends of Parkview, which supports Parkview Special School, and in the last 3 years, I've set up my own charity called Sensibility, which helps adults with a learning difficulty in our local community of Lisbon. I'm passionate about advocating for anybody with a severe learning difficulty. Predominantly, the fundraising I do with Sensibility is for the adult unit, LARC in Lisbon, because that is the only suitable post-19 provision for my daughter, and when I went to look around it needed more resources and more provision, which is why I based my fundraising efforts there. So my words today are not meant as a criticism. I simply wish to highlight the improvements that can be made and help. My words, however, are not just stories. They are lived experience, and therefore they are strong evidence for reform. What is wrong with the current SEND school provision? So the pathways from education to leaving school are not clear to families and they are littered with pitfalls. From the ages 3 to 19, little to no explanation is forthcoming to parents on the statementing process and what that actually means for their child. But more importantly, what it will mean for that child when they transition, be that at age 16, 18 or 19. Pupils granted with a statement of educational needs used to have the legal right to a referral for a social worker. That statement paperwork suggests, if that statement paperwork suggests that your child has a complex disability, high care needs, or the family is under severe stress, it may trigger a formal social care assessment. But surely a child who is already attending a severe learning disabled school, an SLD school, they will qualify at this point for a social worker. But no, only if your child passes this social care assessment will a social worker be assigned. This is the first overlap of responsibility between education and social care. Statement can be granted from birth, but input from health, which is the second overlap of care and responsibility, that's brought in at birth to indicate early intervention services are secured. That happened with Emily, so she has a genetic diagnosis. So from birth, we were able to pick up a social worker at a MENCAP nursery and then get into Parkview Special School. And I don't think I was aware of how important that was at the time. I just wanted my daughter to go to school from 4 to 19 and I wouldn't have to think about it again. So I'm very grateful for the intervention from health to get me into that education system. If your statement reads that you have a learning difficulty, this means something entirely different to being diagnosed with a learning disability. For a real life example, Emily has a learning disability. Caleb has a learning difficulty. Okay, so you can see the two people we're trying to represent here. And on a crucial note, in Northern Ireland, if you're a parent interacting with the education authority, Specifically here in Northern Ireland, the education system chooses the broad term learning difficulty to cover almost everything from mild, moderate and severe learning difficulties within an MLD and SLD setting. However, if the origin is from healthcare, if your diagnosis in origin is from healthcare, they call it a learning disability. And when that translates to school and education authority in Northern Ireland, you will then often be categorised as having a severe learning difficulty. I know that's confusing. Are you keeping up? So what is the big deal with that? Why is there disparity between the two? What I'll do is I'll give you the timeline of what happens when you're leaving Children's Disability Services, and I'll explain how that impacts. So at age 14, the preparation begins. And the Children's Disability team begins formal transition planning with transition coordinators working with you as a parent to map out future options for adult life, housing and continuing education. I'm hoping that's accurate actually. I'm not entirely sure on the exact role of the transitions officer, so maybe that could be
There aren't many
clarified as to does their role include those three things. So from 14 years old, if you're a pupil attending an SLD or MLD school with a medical issue, such as they are tube fed, Emily's tube fed, she's having her feed at the moment, they require personal care, so that's all toileting needs. If they require emergency medication for a medical condition, I believe that their parent and carer must be told at this point, at 14 years of age, that their child would only qualify to attend a health and social care trust provision post-19. You would not believe the amount of parents who do not know or understand this. They have great expectations that their child will have multiple options available to them post-19, and they set in their head a preference as to where they would like them to go. Direct payments for a child with diabetes, ironically, the direct payment can only go to a medical professional outside of school hours, and yet staff in an SLD school are expected to manage the same needs inside school without even basic training offered. Nursing do not oversee any medical interventions unless the pupil is PEG fed. So there's a bit of a disparity there between what happens in school and what happens when they leave school, and that needs addressed. From ages 16 to 17 is the handover period. During these years, your children's disability social worker will work closely alongside an adult social worker. They will conduct a joint assessment to ensure your child meets the criteria for adult disability services, so that support does not suddenly stop. That is actually not currently working to timescale. For example, I went to a transitions meeting at my daughter's school this morning, and there was a representative there for all of the providers, and I actually did meet the transitions lady who gave me a leaflet. Transition coordinator for the South Eastern Trust, Rebecca O'Neill, and that was really useful, but there were no social workers at that meeting. There were no children's disability social workers, and there were no adult social workers. So really, there were teachers on site, but the whole system falls down unless you have all those links in the chain. And I said to the lady, if the catchment area of the school you travel to falls over the boundaries of a trust area, so Belfast and South Eastern Trust as an example, this disqualifies you from applying to post-19 opportunities across both trust borders. You must apply to a provision within the trust that you live in. This is not automatically flagged up with schools, parents, social workers, or the daycare panel during any stage of the transitions process. So I have heard of children reaching that last year of school and they're like, well, why are you trying to apply? They're coming to Parkview Special School and would naturally transition to LARC, the adult unit. You won't qualify, you live in Carryduff, your nearest unit is Mount Oriel. They didn't know of that until the last year of school. That needs to be flagged up a lot earlier with parents and providers. in Northern Ireland, once a young person turns 16, they are legally presumed to have full capacity to make their own decisions. To determine whether a 16-year-old has capacity for a specific decision, a professional, like a doctor or a social worker or a teacher, must apply a 4-stage functional test. I strongly believe that at this stage, those without mental capacity, such as my daughter, should have a care plan. So I did have a chat from somebody within the school to ask what was the process about declaring that Emily didn't have capacity, and she had just turned 16 at the time, and they were unaware of any of the protocols surrounding that. So I do think, again, that needs clarified. At 18, the official switch. On your child's 18th birthday, the Children's Disability Social Worker will officially close their case. And from this point forward, all assessments, respite allocations and care packages are managed by adult social care. What parents are not told is that they will have no access to an adult social worker until their child's 18th birthday. There is little to no communication between children's and adult social worker teams, and this needs to change. And I mean, they're still in a school setting, and that is affecting them. You may say that's health. I don't believe that it is, if that's going to affect transitions. I currently can't get to talk to an adult social worker. There's one, so Emily's 17 and a half, she'll be 18 in February. The earliest I'll speak to a adult social worker is September at her LAC review, with, you know, a few months to go. I don't think that that's sufficient. For an adult with a statement that reads learning difficulty to access day opportunities after turning 18, they need to prove that they have a learning difficulty. This astounds me. This requires IQ testing by a clinical psychologist, which can currently take 6 to 9 months and give an unbalanced outcome by not taking any other factors for their past development and educational history. A proper assessment requires a comparison of multiple factors rather than a single metric result like your IQ test. So I'll just read you a case study that was sent in from a parent who couldn't attend today. And this highlights a mainstream example where a child has gone to mainstream school and has then fallen off this cliff edge of care. This statement highlights the ongoing challenges faced by Callan and his mum, Cherise, due to the lack of appropriate support services for young people with learning difficulties in Northern Ireland, particularly in rural areas such as Mid-Ulster. Callan has autism, ADHD, PDA, challenging behaviours and significant social and emotional support needs. Although he has a high IQ, he requires daily adult support to manage anxiety, regulate behaviour and remain safe. His mother feels that professionals often overlook his vulnerabilities because of his intelligence, dismissing his needs as not too bad. A major issue raised is that Callan is not considered to have a learning disability because his IQ assessment scored just 4 points above the qualifying threshold of 70, despite his day-to-day functioning and adaptive skills being assessed as below average. As a result, he falls into a gap where he is considered too able for some services, yet not independent enough to cope without substantial support. During school, Callan received SEND support and one-to-one assistance, but this ended at age 16 when his statement ceased. Since then, suitable educational placements and services have been extremely limited. The further education placement offered was not fully appropriate, and attending even one day has been difficult due to his complex needs. The statement also raises concerns about the lack of consistency and long-term support from services, despite Callan being known to the Northern Trust since early childhood. Cherise describes he is fighting for education, transport and support, often feeling unheard and unsupported as a single parent. As Callan approaches adulthood, there is growing concern that the services he truly needs either do not exist or are inaccessible because he does not meet the criteria for a learning disability. The statement calls for greater awareness, improved support systems, and more suitable services for young people like Callan and their families across Northern Ireland. So that's where I believe that an SLD school should mean something, or if you go to any special needs school, it should mean something. No two children in an SLD school are the same. By trying to narrow down their diagnosis as a child with either medical disability or behavioural difficulty, you miss the point that they will both equally need a great deal of one-to-one input from services as an adult. Are you going to sing over the top? She's going to sing us all to sleep. Right, next bit. Issues with transitioning. Provider days are great. Like I said, I went to one this morning, giving information to parents. But really it's the teachers that know them best. It's the educators that know their needs and really relate to them. Greater training in the transition process is needed for senior staff members in schools. The majority have little understanding of what is involved. I would ask you to consider training post-primary staff on how to write transition plans, on the post-19 process and on the post-19 providers. The process currently relies on parents telling school their preference of a post-19 place and then school telling the health and social care daycare panel in that trust area. It's like a game of Chinese whispers. That's not how the process is supposed to work. Education are not meant to have any involvement in this process, yet with the lack of social workers they have been drawn in, probably with the fear of teaching a child from the age of 4 to 19 and then seeing them be released into the big outside world. So they're taking on extra workload to complete transition plans, which isn't how it's supposed to be. This is where the gap of the social worker comes in and the process collapses. Education can currently give the predicted placements required for the next 5 years with a good bit of accuracy. They may get the odd placement wrong, but I think it's easy to predict when you look at 5 years worth of pupils coming up the way. You can see what positions, what placements they're going to need. Is there a data collection facility to support this planning? Does the EA have this information currently, and can it be published? Those would be questions I'd love answered. Can, again, an SLD school should mean something. Provision mapping for them as adults as soon as they are known to school, aged 3 or 4 years old. It's not that difficult to predict an outcome when their life outcome, like Emily's, won't change or improve. You know, pretty much that picture was her picture of health aged 4. It's not changed now, age 17. The tick box to say transitioning is complete is made by the social worker as they complete the forms with all the details on it. When it goes to the transitioning panel, they are the ones who recommend what is suitable for that young person. Teaching staff don't do an awful lot in regard to that. They are passing on what parents feel is suitable for their young person. Teaching staff are advising them to look round at facilities and do visits, but they aren't involved in the process. School have now brought forward annual reviews from May to February from the age of 16. At the annual review, that falls in the school year of their 18th birthday, so that'll be next year for Emily. Families will sit with the panel, social worker, teaching staff, and where a placement is agreed. This is where it becomes a bit like that game. Sorry to be crude, but a bit like if you watch Love Island, snog, marry or avoid. You go in thinking you've got 3 choices and you've only got avoid. So my only choice for Emily's placement is the one that I wouldn't want her to go to. So I don't have 3 choices, I've got 1 choice. And at that panel I'm likely to be told that's your 1 choice, and then I'm likely to be told, well, that's subject to availability. This is where some parents are shocked that this is their one and only option as their child's needs are so severe. So really parents shouldn't be getting to that point with 4 months to go, being told that in the February when their child is leaving in the June. 15% of pupils known to Parkview Special School have a sibling at the school. A real life example of this is twins Grace and Mia, who were in Emily's class and left school last June. I spoke to their dad yesterday to ask how many days a week they get. Twins. He also has a younger son at Parkview. That's three children in an SLD school. 3 days a week, he said. They were told 5. They don't get transport either. I said, how are you coping? He says, it's difficult. They expect to go to school. They still ask about school. We're now 9 months in. They're very much in tune with that routine and the stimulation that they got. Greater opportunities have opened up to those who are more able-bodied, but those with a severe learning disability are pigeonholed into one placement, which is subject to staffing, transport and availability of places. Those that transition then have a significant disruption to their daily routine. The creation of a dedicated transition teacher in each SEND school would alleviate a lot of pressure that teaching staff currently feel. And why should SEND schools not have that? We have careers advisors in secondary schools. Why do we not have transition officers in a special educational needs setting as a professional role? So on to the last chunk of what I want to say. Cheers! You're going to have your photo taken again, you think? What is the value of holistic teaching in SEND schools? As a person who has spent the last 10 years fundraising and investing well over £500,000 into Parkview Special School, I know that the money has provided the bells and whistles where the educational authority stops. She loves to heckle me.
Tough crowd.
This has funded music therapy, a mental health counsellor, and family support worker, reflexology, art therapy days, a dedicated sensory room, swings and trampolines for rebound therapy, autism initiative training for both staff and families, 2 dedicated forest school areas for outdoor stimulation, provision of eye gaze software for non-verbal communication, insurance and training of a sensory support dog for the school, mobility bikes for use around the Mugger, funded haircuts in the school salon, after school club opportunities for our young people to go on residential trips and to celebrate at their leavers prom, not forgetting provision and maintenance of a minibus to aid our wheelchair users to get out, surplus to EA transport provision. We are currently sitting with a pot of fundraised money waiting to add to the revamp of the hydrotherapy pool at Parkview Special School. Again, to add the bells and whistles to the basic scheme, which the EA has been badgered into commissioning by our charity for almost 5 years, as the pool often doesn't operate due to the age of the facility. What then is the value of holistic teaching at its core EA level of provision in the likes of my daughter's school day? Structured routine, communication time, sensory-based play, interactive story time, whole school assemblies, physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, speech and language therapy, input from OTs and sight hearing specialists to aid learning in the classroom environment, daily outings and tasks for those who are able. Why would all of this be put in place simply for it to be stopped at aged 19? The opportunities available to neurotypical school leavers aged 18 are second to none in Northern Ireland. The opportunities to our SEND young people are none. The Department for Health is taking on the lion's share. Health and social care intervene for life. Education needs to be in place until at least 25. In SEND schools, the first priority before any learning can take place is to make sure a pupil feels safe and supported. Cared and loved for, if you don't like the word supported. Only after those 2 things are present can learning really begin. Presently, post-19 health and social care facilities do the most incredible job at providing these 2 elements for our SEN adults, but they are not teachers. They provide health and they provide social care. They provide daily stimulation for the daycare users, but it is chalk and cheese compared to the structure and input seen in schools. My charity Sensibility fundraise for the South Eastern Trust Adult Unit, LARC. Again, we have provided the bells and whistles to make the everyday a little easier for staff. We've offered staff the opportunity for us to fund autism initiative training, Well, I can tell you it felt like tumbleweed had run through the meeting that day, that it was suggested health and social care staff are not there to teach. But if there is no progress, there is only regression. Health and social care need to see inclusion from education to offer a genuine, person-centred approach to provision. They need to reflect the young person's needs, not just what the system happens to have available. Health and social care facilities are currently understaffed and under-resourced. So why not solve the staffing problems by adding educators to the post-19 system? Thank you for listening.
Karen, and I mean really, really comprehensive briefing, and just that lived experience is invaluable to committee to hear that evidence, so thank you. Before I start my questions, I just want to say from the outset, we do have a big agenda, but I do not want to be calling members on time in this session, so I'm just asking everybody to work with me to maybe let's avoid preambles and let's get to the evidence that we need to hear from the parents here today, because I really, really don't want to be doing that. This is not the evidence session for me to be clock watching, so I'm just asking members to work with me on that so that everybody can have the opportunity and that we can get the best evidence from the parents and through Emily here as well today, because I think this is evidence that really we haven't had before. I think we have heard from you, Alma, before, but I think this very, very detailed lived experience of what this process feels like is crucial for how this committee takes forward any recommendations in our inquiry into SEN and our considerations going forward. So I can't emphasise how much your evidence is valued and appreciated today. So I maybe don't want to get into the legislative space at the moment, because I think I'm clear in my mind in the asks of your campaign, and I'm persuaded on those asks, and I have no doubt that a recommendation around the need for legislative protections post-19 will be in our SEN inquiry report. I don't have any doubt about that. So I want to just ask about, you set out really clearly what that experience of transition planning was like. If you could you just really set out for us, clearly set out a process that isn't working, that has too many disparities depending on what your diagnosis is or what your statement says. What should a good transitions plan look like, and who should be involved?
Good question. You want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll take that. Like I can answer this one. I've said it, I think, when I presented a year ago. It's very obvious to me I've learned so much more, which is why I wanted to bring Karen, because I thought the transitions area was not great. It's far worse. Just going through it myself, literally yesterday, Caleb has been diagnosed. We have proved he has a learning disability. I have had sleepless nights, but I've managed to push through and prove that my child has a learning disability, having been in special school since he was 3 with complex needs. Anyway, transition-wise, I think what needs to happen is a collaboration from many departments. I think, I can't emphasize enough how awful the process is to not know what's coming next. I would say it's almost like you're given a set of doors like Alice in Wonderland with a set of keys. You figure out how to get in one, and then you go, oh, great, we made it. And then you go, oh gosh, there's another one. And you have to go again and again and again, and it never ends. You're not told anything. There's no communication to parents. There's no referral pathways. There's actually, I've said it from the start of this campaign, there is no guideline from A to Z what is to come next. I have just got to Caleb's 18th birthday to find out he had to go through a whole new set of assessments to prove he has a learning disability, even though he's been at a special school and he's been involved with the children's learning disability team since he was 4. Everything's documented. We've done everything the right way. We've tried to, it is incredibly anxiety inducing for parents. The stress that is put on parents because they don't know what's coming next is just horrendous. And I echo what Karen was saying, this would not happen to grammar school pupils. You know, you wouldn't say, well, here, you've one choice, and we're not going to give you any careers advice, and we're not going to practice any interview skills, and we're not going to, don't worry about the UCAS form because you're not going to be able to go. You know, it is completely a lack of equity here, and it's a lack of equity that has existed for decades. And I think, you know, I know Paul Given, we've met over a year ago, and one of the things he said, well, post-19 is not my remit, and I said, that's right, but you know what transitions are? So that is the first step to post-19. And if you can't put the time and the effort into actually listening to parents and actually giving choices, and actually, could we just be honest? But if they were really honest in that phase, they would tell you there's very little on the other side. So
It doesn't make sense to me that transitions planning should be a statutory function for the Department of Education, that they have to do. It is something they must do. But to say, we'll do the bits around the planning, but we've really no interest in what lies on the other side of that.
Yeah.
What the provision is, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, who can access it, that makes no sense. I mean,
I think
how is
point-
that engaged with
yeah.
the plan? So the education it needs to be beyond just facilitating a process and ticking a box. They
And I
need
think
to
what
be
we need
engaged.
to do as well, you know, from the top down, could we please recognise that in Northern Ireland, the be-all and end-all is not an academic pathway? Could we please recognise our young people who deserve a future? Just because they don't have that academic pathway doesn't mean they don't have a right to an equitable future.
Yeah, I would second that. I would say all of those holistic teaching that they have in schools really underpins their mental health.
Yeah.
Mental health, all of those therapeutic solutions. If that stops at 19, you are going to have ongoing problems with adults with behavioural issues, and young people like Emily that just, their world has changed significantly overnight.
Look, I'm not going to take up other members' time here. I'll bring in the Deputy Chair and then other indications from other members.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Aaron and Alma and Emily and Caleb, of course. I have just one question for you, really, because you said yourself, Alma, there's a lot of departments need to be involved here. And I was wondering, first of all, what role does health have in all of this? And what sort of engagement have you had with health up until now?
Okay, so I'll go with our experience because my experience will be different to Karen's. So I think, yes, at this point it's quite frustrating as a parent because I'm looking at the transition phase going, okay, why are health and education really not coming together on this? For example, you know, Caleb turned 18, I had his annual review. You know, the teacher was there, there was a careers person there, there was no social worker, there was, you know, I didn't even know that should have been the case until somehow we've slipped through the cracks. So health needs to be involved. It has to be a joint thing because I think, you know, you cannot put mainstream and special schools into one box together. You have to separate it out and realise that the needs of our young people are very much in the health space.
Sorry to cut across you, but
Yeah.
have you any idea why the health department is so detached from this process?
I would say probably the cost. It all comes down to money. I think our children sometimes, I speak to parents all the time, we feel like our children are a price tag. You see them running around and you don't see them as human beings, you see them as a price tag, which I think is really difficult. I suppose, you know, I don't understand that because I've been going and knocking on the door of health, as you all know, for many months now, bringing solutions and trying to say, I want to help you move this forward. Because I'm telling you now, in 3 or 4 years, you're going to triple that cost if you don't get a handle on this. But actually, if you look at our special school leavers, for example, this June, I think there's 300 leaving special school. And you're telling me you can't legislate and create a care plan for those 300? 300 when you've got over an economy, Keith Archibald, who has covered a massive portion of young people. To me, I don't feel like I'm asking. There's hundreds. She's covered the bigger portion, the first piece of the puzzle. Now we're over to health to say, stop ignoring the needs here. This has to start somewhere, but it's going to mean education and health actually have to talk to each other. And the summer schemes, unfortunately, were an example of where they don't talk to each other.
Are you aware that there's a health and education oversight group?
No.
Right, okay.
No.
Well, there is.
Okay. Thank you.
It was set up in March 2024.
Okay.
So perhaps you should go and try and knock on their door at some time.
Okay, no, that's good to
and
know.
find out what work they have done.
Okay. Thank you for. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Do you want to come in on anything, Karen, yourself?
No, I would just second what Alma says. Collaboration is key. Emily has been picked up by the systems, so her LAC review kicked in when she was 8, through respite. But it's just how many times the two sit in parallel with each other. So a statement dictates the social worker, dictates whether you get direct payments, dictates whether you get extra that financial support to give all that she needs. They sit side by side.
Yeah.
Excellent. And perhaps the committee can help with contact for the health and education oversight group.
Yeah, I was
Thank
going
you.
to say
That'd be
that.
great.
Yeah, we have some, Deputy Chair, we have some correspondence in from the department in relation to that, which sets out the things they have discussed when they met. So if it's appropriate to share that through, I can check through the clerk and the team whether that is appropriate to share, because
Thank you.
it seems like an appropriate place to begin, perhaps. Thank you, Deputy Chair. Danny, you indicate?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming in. That was a lot of information. I think
A lot of information.
by a lot of people learned
There's
a
a
lot
lot more.
today. I know there is 100%. Just going to start off because something that just piqued my attention was the transition officers. How many are there?
They're supposed. I think kindly Michelle Guy actually wrote to the Minister, because there was 10 a year ago when I asked.
Is that 2 per trust?
Apparently, 2 per trust maybe. Apparently there is 10. I've kind of heard on the ground there's maybe 6 because there's due to sickness and maternity, and fair enough, but yeah, I'm not sure there's really 10. I've never come across one.
It comes down to the priorities, because even you referenced Paul Given there as well in your remarks, saying that it's just not my area. That's ministers closing down avenues straight away in their own minds, because you've said it, one minister's there done a massive cohort, but then you need that transition to happen between health and education. Look, I see a massive gap in education. Why should the cliff edge happen? Why aren't the EA and the department helping with those pathways? And if the pathways aren't being created, then make space within what you have as well. You shouldn't just end it there. You should have a responsibility. And I think that's something that could be looked at from an education side. I think there's a gap in legislation there for education. I do want to ask you about the frustrations around the health minister as well. I know this is the education committee, but I was deeply frustrated by him when he was portraying that there wasn't enough time to do the legislation. And I'd just like to hear your view on that there, because you're the cold face of it.
Yeah. Let's see. What did that feel like? Honestly, incredibly hurtful. It's people say sentences, officials have their jobs, this is our lives. When you say no to us, you're saying no to Caleb, you're saying no to Emily. Incredibly, incredibly hurtful. I think it was a dismissal for me. It wasn't even there was just a brick wall. I wasn't getting anywhere, and it just feels like, I've been coming up here now for 2 years. It does feel a bit like our children just don't matter. There's no aspirations. Why bother? I just don't understand that, and that needs to change. And I will keep coming up here and saying the same thing every year until it does.
Because it is frustrating for us, because I did ask it that day in the chamber, because I'd say everyone here be happily we'll sit as long as we need to sit to work through legislation. The Speaker himself has said the same thing. If a minister wants to bring something forward, the Speaker's not going to step in the way either. So look, I'd say that door's still open for that work to happen. So I hope a message comes from the day that some ministers do need to do more and MLAs are willing to do more,
Yeah.
because we have to prioritise all children. It can't be the way it's being described today, and I do agree with you that it is like a price tag, because I see it in my own constituency work, particularly around direct payments. It's deeply frustrating. I sit on the place where I represent. I would have people in both trusts between Belfast and South Eastern, and I can even see the disparity in support that happens between two different trusts. And when it gets to the direct payments, like there's children that are not getting support because they can't get a social worker, and that's not fair. Like, that's because once you get a social worker in place, disability social worker in place, the direct payments happens, and then they get support from some of the great human volunteers sector that we have out there. The heavy lifting being done by them.
Sorry to interrupt. That's exactly what, like, everyday conversations in school. That's every conversation I have with every other parent. One saying, "Well, I'm not getting direct payments. I don't have a social worker," and they have a child or children in a special needs school. That's why I say, like, it should mean something. There should be a categorisation to say, you've earned your place in an SLD school.
Yeah.
That qualifies you, and it qualifies you for life.
And one point I'd like to pick up on with health as well, and I know, gosh, you're in the education committee talking about health stuff, but it's because of that transition I keep pointing it back to that. I had a parent come to me 2 weeks ago, and she said, my son, the referral for adult services went in 2024. She rang them and said, "Where are we?" And they said, "We're working through lists from 21-22. So you haven't even got to the point where your adult services referral to go through the barrage of testing to prove that you need adult services, and it's starting to feel a little bit like, let's make it as difficult as possible so that we don't have to provide the care. And that's what it feels like to many parents I speak to. And I think it's, you know, parent after parent in my inbox, you know, and this is crisis. We are in a crisis. Post-19 is in a massive crisis. And I don't really understand why we're not driving this. I asked the Minister for Health if he would do a post-19 inquiry into the trusts, and he said no. And everything I get really is a no. So
I'll finish with this wee point. It's just that even from any of the cases that I work with in the families, you get to know as well, because when someone comes looking for help, it's never straightforward. Like, they'll always need, whether it's like placements or reduced handle, whatever it is. But the one thing, no matter what age now, there's one of them actually gives out a wee group about a couple of months back, and their children are quite young, but they're all already worried about 19, but they're also then worried about when they get ill or when they're near the end of their life, who's going to look after their child. And it's keeping them awake at night, every single night. So,
you've no idea.
but thank you for bringing the cause so far already, because you are giving people hope. You really are, because I hear
think
a lot.
next week we'll be with health, and we're going to talk about the lifelong aspects. So yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Michelle, you'd indicated next.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, folks. Look, Emily, Karen, Alma, and Caleb, who was here. Thank you so much for, as always, Alma, you've been here many times to give us your evidence. It's so appreciated. Karen, you've done a wonderful job this morning articulating just the complexity of this system. I'm going to shout out Parkview on your behalf as well. You know how much I love that school. I can't wait to see you on Lark next week. I want to start with, you've given us a sense of it, but I just want to be really clear on what it's like and what kind of support that parents get through this process. Do you feel supported through transitions, or do you feel that you're the coordinator of that process?
100% you are the coordinator, and I think that comes from the statementing process. I must admit that each year at your child's annual review, you get their school report, you talk through it with their teacher, and they say, does the statement of educational needs meet what is required for your child? And any other parent will just go, yeah, I couldn't tell you. I only learnt this week that there's a difference between a learning difficulty and a learning disability. So I wonder how many parents are out there with that listed as a difficulty on their educational
I
statistic.
don't want to interrupt, just to add it to what you're saying. I guess one of the points of asking that was you two are very articulate and
Yeah.
very able in terms of advocacy. There's a lot of parents out there who won't be. So how do they get through this process? And just add that to your answer, just their experience if you can.
Yes, I would say that no information is forthcoming, so we need to be working to make a very clear piece of communication that is available to parents from age 14 to say this is what's coming at 14, this is what's coming at 15, 16, 17 and 18. This is lovely, but I was a visual communicator before I was a mum with a degree in it, and we were always told substance over style. So I know Dee Geary has a file this thick about transitions, and I would love to work with somebody who'd be interested in working on a communication
My next
piece.
question, how valuable would it be to have that consistent end-to-end kind of process, if you like, or checklist for parents in terms of what their expectations should be around transitions, and how do you feel about the fact that clearly doesn't exist right now?
But it's this is nothing new. You know, we've been shouting for help the whole way through here. I think one point I would make is like parents are fed up of actually saying, here we go again, we have to be the ones that go and fight. You know, we talk about the fight, but it's fight after fight after fight after fight. So I think, you know, one of the things I would like to see happen these provider days, it's funny, I went to one and I walked around and I got to Cedar Foundation and I said, can I just ask you, of any of the providers in this room, could anyone offer a one-on-one to anyone that needs it? Doesn't exist, because the trust don't double fund. So if you need extra support, you only have one place you can go, and you've got to hope there isn't a waiting list to get in. So I think, you know, we need, those provider days are good. What I would love to see is the school being the hub for information. You have brilliant staff here, and not to put more on their plate, but if you could have, instead of those provider days, before the provider days, could we tell everyone what this means? Because provider days, they don't even know why they're going half the time.
Don't make it optional. Make it that
you go and you're
this
like,
is your requirement as a parent or carer. You have to be here.
And you rely on the poor providers. You know, you go up to them and you're like, help, and they're like, we can't because your child doesn't fit in this box, but really, or you know, and they're doing the best they can. It's not their fault.
Even the transition service was able to tell me, we're in place from 14, but we don't really see you until the final stage. And I said, well, can I call on you if I need your help? She was able to tell me yes. That's the first time in Emily's, 6 months off.
But we need to know what's coming.
Yeah.
One last, just more technical question, perhaps from something that you mentioned, Karen. We've talked about the difficulty or the difference between the disability and the difficulty and the impact that has in terms of post-19. You referenced in the statement how that's presented in the statement is based on whether in school you have a medical intervention required or not. Now it's clear Caleb may not have a medical intervention, but he clearly has a disability.
Yeah.
Would you like to see those thresholds change within the statement so then that is clear and articulated early on, and that pathway is clearer for the parent at that stage?
Absolutely. It seems to be too narrow, whereas it needs to be broader. I mean,
yeah, the one example I would give is Caleb himself, and this only came to light very recently as I have had many sleepless nights. So on his statement, this is why I went out to parents and I did a post and said, does everyone realise that on their child's statement a difficulty is under education and a disability is health? Difficulty is, rightly so, you get the educational supports for that, but a disability is seen as lifelong. And people were like, all scurrying away, checking their statements, going, it says difficulty. And basically what happened with Caleb was Caleb is now obviously 18. So back when Caleb was first went to a special school, Caleb attended, so back when the library boards existed, it was SLD schools were far less than MLD. So SLD, you would have had Parkview. Now, I'm not going to get them all right here, but there's Parkview, Glenveigh, Fleming, Fulton, and there may be others. But it was more, if you had a physical and a medical disability, you were considered SLD. this is kind of how this happened. I didn't think anything of it. He was put into a school. Caleb was in nappies. He was non-verbal, had behavioural issues, very sensory. You couldn't get more SLD than Caleb White when he was 3. But because he was put into an MLD school, MLD was written on his statement. I did not know until a month ago that meant we now have to face a barrage of proving. And I was like, but he's already transferred to the adult learning disability team for psychiatry. He's got an anxiety disorder, blah, 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 blah. But you want me to prove, I just couldn't get my head around it. Thankfully, I had a stack of evidence, and I'm sure you can all guess when it comes to Caleb, I will fight tooth and nail not to put him through unnecessary stress. So I was able to get it confirmed yesterday that they've agreed. But not everyone knows that. And what's happening is for young people, when they are doing those tests, yes, they do look at the adaptive functioning end, but it is reliant on the IQ score. So if you're 1-2 points over, you're told, sorry, you're not deemed to have a learning disability, you don't have access to adult services. If that person is autistic, they go back to autism services, and often the autism service kind of go, we don't really have a statutory service for autistic adults. So what do? There's people sitting at home. The cracks are there.
I think there will undoubtedly be. I do just want to say, as a side, I think the music that Emily's brought here today is helping keep everybody very calm, which is a welcome addition to the Education Committee. I think there will undoubtedly be actions around that disability versus difficulty, and I think in terms of recommendations, but in terms of follow-up actions. Julie, you'd indicated. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, Alma and Karen. It's lovely to meet you both today. Thank you for being here and for sharing your expert information, because you're the one that's living this experience every single day. I just wanted to thank Emily for the singing in particular, because it is very calming and that music's lovely, and Caleb spoke really well, so that means a lot. Thank you. My questions, my first one might seem a bit cryptic, but there's a reason why I'm asking for questions I'm doing elsewhere. But I'm just wondering, in regards to your LAC review experience, when Emily goes to her one where she'll be 18, are you expecting the child social worker to be there to sort of advocate for you? I'm just assuming no, to meet with the adult social worker, or is that just a fresh start? Like you're nearly at square one again?
It will all be, so the LAC review in September when she's still 17 will have the children's disability social worker. So that's so that I get introduced to the adult social worker. But at her previous LAC review 6 months ago, I felt like I was putting the questions to my current social worker, who is top tier, the senior social worker, and I was asking, what's coming next for me? Do I need to get her finances sorted? Do I need power of attorney? I'm confused about her, I'm still confused about her mental capacity. What do I need to do? And they were able to say that they have to take it to court to get a care protection order. And if they don't do that while you're a child, so if it flips over into that adult time, there's a cost of £275. There's a cost of £275 if I don't put her direct debits in her name before she's 18.
That's right.
There's a separate cost of £275 if I forget to put her child trust fund in her name before she's 18. I still worry day and night about putting a will in place, because I'm a single parent who owns their own house. And I haven't done that yet, because the cost has been quoted to me as £1,200 plus VAT, and I can't afford that.
There's a lot of hoops to jump through,
There's
isn't there, at every stage, and then the information that comes with each one.
This is where justice comes in.
My final question is just to your knowledge, because you have a wide breadth of people involved in your campaign. Is there any area in Northern Ireland where transitions are a wee bit more person-centred, or they may be working a wee bit more streamlined, or is it just across the region? It's just
everyone's
the same?
doing different things.
Yeah.
So
it's not consistent.
I think I put out a post once, and I was like, great, so not one parent has had the same experience as the other. What I would say is there are some families that have come to me and said, oh yeah, we got a transition, and we were fortunate, because we know a lot of people don't. But there was nothing. Okay. So they go through the transition and then they go, we have nothing for your child.
Yeah.
We don't know what to tell you. You know, waiting lists are long. It's really scary actually, and I think it goes back to what Karen was saying. The whole process of transition is weighted on our shoulders. The whole process of when we die and wills and all of that is on our shoulders. You know, the area of controllership is a mess. You're talking, we would have to spend thousands of pounds through the Belfast courts because our kids you can't have power of attorney signed over because they haven't got mental capacity to sign it over. How do you get a bank account? How do you move forward with all these things? And this is why I'm such a big firm believer in these departments coming together before 18, because a lot of these things parents don't know need to be in place. So I'm not saying that justice and communities for benefits and all that everybody needs to like come to every review that you have, but there needs to be some leaflet that has every single area and parents given that to say, this is what you're facing, this is where you go, bring this one for that, bring that one for that, get the information from here, because right now it's Caleb's calls. I am doing that job and I'm doing it for nothing.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and thank you for being so honest as well. It's great for us to hear just the real lived experience, so thank you.
Julie, David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again very much for your presentation today. There was a lot of information, but I've been to a lot of Caleb's Calls events before, but I feel like today there's been an extra level of sort of information for me as someone who doesn't have that lived experience, of friends, as you know, who do have that lived experience, but I don't, and it's given me a greater level of understanding. I've heard some of the requests you have, particularly around education. I think this isn't just education, this is across the departments, but I think the very simple ask is the one you mentioned most recently there, which is the mapping out of this and a document that helps parents to navigate. That is not an awful lot to ask, and there seems so much of this, and I'm sure in complex systems that we have, there are sometimes good reasons for things that have to happen, but it does seem quite often that there are hoops you're made to jump through whenever you're facing enough challenges as it is, and the system should be making it easier, not harder. Could I ask, and I'm almost certain, Alma, it's the same question I asked at Bangor Academy, and you answered it well then, but just because there is that additional level of information today, when we talk about choices, and I think the example that you compare it to careers advice and so on is very useful for those of us who don't have that experience to try and sort of understand that. We've talked before about day opportunity services, and Johnny Walker from 4G was in my office just before I came up here actually. Some of them do great work, and I'm quite familiar with them. I've talked about Larch and so on, and some of the work that they do. Beyond that, what do some of those options look like? I heard you saying something about in care settings, would we have an educator present to do that? And also, I was going to leave it to a second question, but given I've done a bit of a preamble, talking also about education being involved up to 25. Now, I'll be honest, I disagree slightly with Danny, and think that I would be a huge encourager of departments needing to learn to work together. But I think it is, to be honest, important that we know where the parameters of departments are and who's responsible for what. But if education was to get involved to a later stage, why 25, and what does that look like? What does beyond that look like? So those are my two questions, if you will.
Yeah, obviously I don't think it should end at 25. I think if you're going to put something in, it should be for that young person's life. The prime example of that, the pandemic, is the best free case scenario we've had to prove that without the input of services, they regress. I think the other thing, I think we've made this point before. I think everybody needs to realise, I've said this before, when Caleb leaves school at 18, he's not 18.
Yeah.
So our young people developmentally are delayed. That word delayed means they're not there with skills. They need longer to learn and get those skills into place. I think, one thing, it's having that sort of, I suppose I've looked at the UK a lot, because you're kind of comparing and going, what do the UK do? And that's to 25. So that's kind of why I've used that as a kind of a bridge, really, just because I was like, how can I prove this? Because you're trying to prove the entire time. But I agree with Karen. This is why when I laid out the manifesto recently for health, really, because we're over in the health space, it was all lifelong, you know, but I think education needs to play a part here. And I think that it's very easy to push it off to health. And I get that. I know the minister has mentioned, you know, well, other departments need to be involved, and he's right, they do, and I totally get that, but he needs to lead on it for young people leaving special school. So I suppose in order to...
I have no problem, by the way, with that, and it's really, I've said this before, and it's not a political point. In less than a year's time, we don't know who will be in the education post, so, and they'll likely be dealing with this into the future. So it's not, for me, this is not trying to, as we might at other times, play politics and defend the minister or against the minister. It's just trying to understand that, you know, if we're talking 25, where does education's role begin and end? And it's fair enough to argue that should be lifelong, but, you know, just in trying to have that discussion.
I suppose my thing too, I've tried to explain to people too, when people hear me talk about education, Caleb is never going to go to tech. He's never going to sit exams. My idea of education for him is developing the skills. Yes. So I'm not saying that Paul Given needs to, you know, make a curriculum to,
of course.
You know,
it's different for
but
each child.
but it's within the settings.
My version of education is holistic learning. So at daycare she won't have input from, she won't have sensory input, she won't have like a structured day, she won't have sensory play, she won't have access to physiotherapy, OT, speech and language therapist, all those things that you get in school that they need.
For you, does that look like, I'm sorry Cheryl, but it's just to get a better idea myself. As I say, I know the day opportunity services and so on is the other options that you were looking at, essentially those medical settings having an educational element which is more structured in that way and add structure to the day.
If you look at the gold standards of places that we both like, I mean, the National Autistic Society in Carryduff, I've been and looked around their unit, it is superb. I would encourage you all to go there and look at it. A Space up near Derry. That is the aspiration. That's why when I said about, you know, we want those three options, I'd love to send Emily to Live Life Wellbeing Centre in Lisbon. It is the gold standard of post-19 care.
See, day opportunities, one thing I'll just say, David, and there's very little choice. So for young people that need a one-on-one or would need medical care like Emily, day opportunities is rolled out.
Yes.
It's only a day centre.
Yep.
So day opportunities, you know, I'm hoping Caleb will go to Live Life because they have a higher ratio of staff. But it's really, really tough to find the provision that meets. I mean, I've gone to every charity and they are incredible, you know, and I've gone around, but I couldn't ask them to take Caleb with the needs he has. And to be fair, they would kind of go, you know, and I was like, he'd never cope with that, and I wouldn't put that on a, you know. So, but also, you know, I suppose one of the things I would say, and I've said to Mr. we have models in Northern Ireland. You know, you see the cuts to the voluntary sector. If the government can't fund what we need, fund the ones who can. They're right there.
Well, look, thank you very much for your answers, and I hadn't heard of a couple of the ones that you mentioned, so I will certainly look into that. Thank you very much.
We'll move on then to Cara, you'd indicated next.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to Emily, Karen, Alma and Caleb. What a powerful, you know, introduction today. It will really stay with me for a long time, and I've learned so much. I just have one question in the interest of time, and that's around, I have a very rural constituency, and you really dive deep there about some of the rural needs that are often overlooked. And I'm really glad you mentioned A Space, because they're remarkable. I've been down and visited it personally and was just blown away by the level of support that they can provide parents and our young people. I'm currently working on a case with a young man who's transitioning out of a special school, and he lives in a rural area. And one key issue I've seen is oftentimes day centres don't have the adequate staff with the right skills to help our children, particularly if they have a diagnosis of something perhaps like diabetes, in addition to the learning disability or difficulty that they may already have. Can you speak to that? Is there any experiences you personally have heard throughout your campaign, and maybe some ways that you think that we should resolve this? Thank you.
Yeah, you go. So when I was at the transition meeting this morning, I spoke to adult nursing community nurses, and they said that they do go into non-trust-based providers and provide nursing care on an individual basis as per need. And I wasn't aware of that until this morning. I thought that was great, but the crux of that is that the provider then has to agree to. So say Emily had the nurse could go in and do her peg feeds. If that provider wouldn't do her personal care, that disqualifies her from going to that provider. So there was obviously a facility there from health, from nursing care, community nursing care, to go in and make that provision possible, but it was that the provider wouldn't tick all of the boxes. Does that make sense?
I think I know there was a young chap who went to a special school who had diabetes, funnily enough, and had mental capacity, would have been capable of going to tech, and was told, sorry, because of your medical needs, you can't. You'll go to a day centre. And then the mental health, the potential, the regression, the loss of skills, it's not equitable, is it? And that's what people are being told, and that's what's happening across the board.
It's so devastating. As you say, it's about the access to opportunities as much as, day centres. It's just so grossly unfair. I just want to thank you both sincerely for being here and for bringing, your incredible children along with us, because you're really highlighting the gaps and the failures that are so evident, and some of which are so easily fixed, and yet you're here and you have to advocate for essentially basic human rights for your children. So thank you so much. Now, I just really wanted to tap in there to the rural aspect, and it's something I'm seeing on my end. So it is interesting to hear that it's wider and those issues still stand. So happy to pass back to the chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cara. And I'll bring John in. John, I can see your mic is on there, but there seems to be an issue with the audio not coming through. I don't know if we need to check in with broadcast on that.
Maybe your volume or your settings.
Try again there, John.
No.
Okay.
He's going to go off and back on again.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what I'll do is I'll bring Kathy in, and then hopefully we'll re-establish the connection with John.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much, guys. That was there's so much information there, and an awful lot that I don't know about other people, but that I wasn't aware of. And you were both fantastic, but I have to say, Caleb and Emily definitely stole the show with the singing and the presentation at the start as well. It's so valuable to have your input as having lived through this, but I wanted to ask this something maybe slightly different around. We're hearing, and we've heard in committee, a lot of parents and a lot of children who are being placed in the wrong setting. We have children who have serious, and again, I'm learning difficulties and the difference between that and disabilities, who are being placed in specialist provisions. And parents there really rabbit caught in the headlights, not knowing where to go, what to do. I have a parent at the minute who's their child is in a school and it's only up until primary 4. So they're facing a transition now at this stage and not knowing where to go, and they're sitting now and don't have any place for September. So is this something, I know we've been very focused on Karen, something as you mentioned earlier that really struck me was like you're one of the lucky ones. You got a golden ticket, for want of a better word, into the special school because you knew Emily's diagnosis more or less from birth. Is there a piece of work that needs done around that wider piece of earlier transitions and those children who are in specialist provisions as well?
I've always been struck by the fact that we don't celebrate that transition from, even when you finish primary. A lot of parents say they have a child with Down syndrome, they might choose to send them to a mainstream primary school, and then towards the end of primary they're thinking, oh, this isn't the right setting for my son or daughter. But we don't have school open days. It's not that big celebration where you transition from primary to secondary. It's very much like, God, it's their space. Will they meet the need? That's sad.
One thing really concerns me, and if this is my lack of understanding, please correct me. The idea at the minute that SPIMs are being created, and for school places of young people that need to go into a special school, they're now going to be placed in a SPIM. For some that might work. I know there's great SPIMs. I'm not criticizing that. My fear is, like everything in the system at the minute, are we going to plan ahead? Because has anybody thought that at 16 they don't go to 19, they go to 16? So I have a parent at the minute who came to me and said, I'm in this very problem. I have a son who can't cope, can't do GCSEs, don't know where to put him. I'm trying to now get him into a special school for the last 3 years. And guess what? She can't. So what is going to happen to all those young people? Who is going to track them along the way? So there will be some that will manage and might be okay. There will be a portion that won't. And then they will come up to that cliff edge at 16. Are they going to get an assessment for a learning disability? Are they going to be transferred to the adults team? Are they going to get moved to a special school placement at that point for post-16? Or are they going to be put out into the world without any support? And
unfortunately, it's probably already happening even now, because we're hearing cases of children who are like at P7 age in with other children who are like P1, P2 and P3 age, because there's no progression for those children. And it's quite ironic, Alma, something that you said there in response to Cara. They couldn't go to tech because of their medical needs. They have to go to a day centre. Yet we're placing children with severe, complex medical needs into mainstream settings. So there's something doesn't add up there. I just want to ask then as well, you mentioned the work that had been done in economy at this minute through Kiva. What should be done what needs to be done immediately is what I'm trying to ask really. I know that there's so much that you've talked about here, but what is the immediate ask?
I think probably back to the communication, something that could be done which is realistic, because if I ask for something I usually get so a very, very basic would be some sort of guideline for parents, and to know where to go, who to ask, whether it's through the school, whether it's the Department for Education, provide that information to the school and the school pass that information out. That at the very least needs to happen. Also, I know one of the things with Kiva's work with economy that came up was that postcode lottery thing, and not knowing where, somewhere where you can type in a postcode and it tells you what providers. If the way the system is at the minute, it is all left to parents. So if that's the case, at least give parents that information, because it is left to us to find it.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And I think that's a real issue, and I think it just occurs to me from dealing with some really excellent providers in my own constituency. Often they find themselves in conflict with the trusts. They're saying, well, we're not going to refer people into you because of X, Y, Z, or the profile of young people aren't eligible for direct payments or whatever it is. And I wonder again, is that going to be a barrier to creating that sort of database? But we need to address those sorts of issues.
And there's no post-19 data. I've said this from the start. So don't know who is at home.
So John's back on the live feed there. Can I see if you're able to come in, John?
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, that's
can
great.
you hear me now?
We can hear you. That's great.
Yes. Okay. Look, thank you very much for the evidence. I thought it was really, really useful and very moving. One thing I just want to address, and I some of my questions were covered by the earlier questions and answers. Would you agree with me that it's not only the right thing to do for our young people who have special education needs, disabilities, but actually many parents are unable to have a career because we don't give the proper support, and that also has a impact on our economy, as well as those adults who want to do something as well as look after their children. And actually there's a cost to this that could pay for itself if we actually give more support.
The piece of work we did through Economy, when they did a review, I've met with Kiva and her officials many times to discuss this, and it's been really good to see just how much they've taken in of that information, and it is an area that I think they're definitely looking at under what will be provided. You're absolutely right. In the grand scheme of things, we have parents at the minute who are holding down their jobs by the skin of their teeth. What happens is, if you're fortunate enough to get a placement, you don't always get transport. So you have to take, your young person isn't independent, so they can't travel on their own. So, you're having to leave your job, do this, do that, do the other. So it's a massive issue. It's also an issue for me when I think about the next generation. So we want to buy into the economy, we want to be taxed, we want to have our careers, we want to have a 5-day provision so we can do that. But also my daughters, when my husband and I aren't here anymore, my daughter turned around very recently and said, what's the point of me having a job? Because I'm going to have to give that up to take care of Caleb, because the reality is there is no system. I love my brother, and my daughters will be left to try and, so you're talking not even just one generation, you're talking about another generation who have gone through, got their exams, gone through uni, fought to get their careers, and here we go again. So it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. And I just wanted with our Senate inquiry to get that on the record. And of course, I probably don't have to say it. Nobody's saying that the main driver for doing the right thing is monetary, but actually it is important that we actually make decisions that help our economy flourish. And I think that's important. And that parents and siblings have the chance to explore those careers that they want to have. So look, I just want to put that on the record, and thank you for all the advocacy you do.
Thank you.
John. Okay. Well, look, that brings the evidence session to an end, and I think I can comfortably speak on behalf of committee to say a very clear thank you. Many other members have done the same for your evidence today, and that's from Emily, Karen, Alma and Caleb. I'm also conscious that you're probably a little weary of thank yous for your advocacy and would like to see some action. So I think we're all conscious of that around the table, and that responsibility, clearly sits with us as elected representatives.
I just end with one point. You're all gonna love this. I don't know if you remember the last time I was here. I posed a challenge. Julie, you won't know about this challenge yet. So we've got another year in this mandate, maybe. So I'm still waiting to see if there's been any work experience for a special school young people. And I said you could team up, but I would like to see you have a young person brought in here from a special school to do work experience, maybe for an hour. It may need to be adapted. I'd really like to see that happen. I'm watching. It's been a year. Clock's ticking. We've got a sheet of bullet points we want to leave with you, if that's okay, just so to sum up what we've talked about.
Yes.
Give you homework to do.
Challenge heard and received, and I'm.
You know what I'm like.
I will say on the record, I have not taken up that challenge as yet, and that is to my shame. So I think we all need to take that seriously in terms of putting our money where our mouth is. if it would also be possible to share Caleb's script from earlier that he read from, so that we can have that just even
Yes,
through
of
the
course.
committee clerk, so that can be added to the record.
Oh, yeah, that'd
so
be
just to
lovely.
make sure we
Thank you.
get everything exactly that wanted to be communicated there. Look, there's a whole range of actions arising from this, not just the evidence for our inquiry. Thank you again.
Yeah,
and
thank
we'll
you
take
for
that
letting
forward.
us come, and it's not
Thank
often
you.
as parents we actually get to be heard, so it's actually really lovely. Thank
You
you.
usually spend committee annoying everybody by saying time, but
sorry.
this evidence was really important today. So
Thank you.
I hope you feel you've had the opportunity to put what you wanted on the record
Really
today
appreciate
for us.
that.
So thank you.
We'll be back to health next week. So.
Good luck. Okay, members. So there's a wealth of evidence there, and we obviously have the benefit of the Hansard record, and I think it is appropriate if members are agreed. I think we had probably officially closed our SEN inquiry, but I would like to propose we do have a draft SEN report that is due, but I think it's appropriate that evidence is included, just to note that. I would like to suggest there are some issues that I think we should be following up regardless of that inquiry, and I'm very happy if either the clerk or any other members want to come in if I have missed anything. So the things that I have noted from my notes, the witnesses were very clear. They would actually like a clear articulation of what is the defined role of a transitions officer as a starting point. So I think that's really important, and I think we should seek that through the Department or EA, whichever is appropriate, and also a clear answer to how many transitions officers are there across Northern Ireland, what areas do they cover, and how many of those are actually currently available and working in the workforce, so we can understand the availability. I think there was also an issue around data sharing. Does EA have data around the number of students leaving special schools that are projected, say, over the next 5 years? And if so, do they share that with a health department or health trusts so that the planning can be undertaken? I think that's an important ask. And I think as well, I would imagine this will feature in our recommendations, but I would suggest that question in relation to why are parents not provided with clear guidance and support and mapping through the transitions process from age 14, so that they understand what is the process, who will they communicate with, and how will they navigate it. I think that's absolutely essential. So I cannot accept, we all know the pressures and budgetary challenges and all of that. I cannot accept that that's beyond the gift of the Education Authority to provide that to parents. So I think we should be asking very clearly what they're going to do. And it was a clear commitment in the SEN reform agenda to ensure that parental voice was heard and the parents were appropriately engaged with and supported through the SEN journey, and transitions should not be any different to that. So those are the things that I've noted. Happy to hear from other members. Deputy Chair first, if you have anything that other members indicating.
Just in relation to the point I made earlier about the oversight group,
that those details are shared. Yeah. So Kathy, then Michelle, and I'm not sure if anyone else.
Just a small point, Chair. You mentioned there about the numbers around those children leaving special schools. I think there is a gap there clearly with specialist provisions as well. Like those children are at this cliff age at 16. So I think we need to try and flesh that out and see what plans the department has there.
I think that should be absolutely highlighted. I think we'll all get this in our constituency offices, those parents who have children with complex needs in mainstream who have no idea what's happening at age 16, and there seems to be a real challenge around even curriculum provision, approved courses that schools can run. A lot of schools almost just making it work by the seat of their pants rather than with any real guidance or support. So I think that's important. Michelle?
I was going to pick up that spin point as well.
Okay.
In terms of asking for the, if you like, definitive end-to-end process, just to check that we're going to ask that from health and education. We don't want to just get education and then a literal cliff edge on the information. Also, there was a piece of research done from Noel Purdy around post-19 and mapping the provision, because they mentioned a number of times having that kind of postcode facility. I think it was tabled at committee. I don't really remember what we did with it. I don't think we spoke to it, but I don't know if it's worth sharing that with the departments as well. There are a list of recommendations there, and maybe get a response to what they're doing in terms of either being aware of them and if they're doing anything to kind of realise those
So absolutely. So the points there, we need to be asking the same questions of health in terms of their rules and the mapping and the support for parents. And there's the Noel Purdy research, maybe to retable that, perhaps pick that up again, share with the departments, and possibly share with the witnesses also. Any other actions, Dave?
No, that's helpful. I think we've definitely discussed that sort of mapping idea at committee before. And it seems to me, It's just reiterating the point rather than a new one, I guess. But it just seems to me a very quick win, relatively speaking. To some of the other, some of this other stuff is complex and it will take time. But like whether it's education, health, economy, that's something officials can speak to each other. Someone put in the lead and create a document that basically is a relatively comprehensive guide. It can be improved over the years, but let's have a start, that something we put in the parents' hands and say, here is something that can help you guide that. That's the very least that could be done.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, David. You know, the issues in terms of what does the future look like are complex. They are urgent, but they're complex. So I don't think it should be seen that by asking for immediate actions we're downplaying that. But if there are immediate actions that can be done, then let's do them.
Actually, be helpful for us too to be able to see what's out there.
Another point, and I don't know if this is the right place to take it forward. They mentioned obviously a number of times about the disability and difficulty point, and the impact of that being on the statement. Is there anything to do with the regs right now that would be an opportunity to clarify that or shift those thresholds? I think I tried to ask it of CLC, but I asked it really badly. But I think it's clearer today what they were kind of explaining to us.
I think your question to CLC was really clear. My sense of their answer was that this isn't a statement issue, and that there may be something else going on. I think the mapping issue, that parents should understand early that this is a potential issue, I think is really important. But I think it is worth asking the question of the department. You know, do they understand that there is an issue with disability and difficulty in terms of impacting this? But I think at the very least, we should be suggesting that if something's going to be flagged with parents early, it is that distinction, so that they can be doing what needs to be done to access a social worker at that stage.
Because I've been helping Alma with her case, and it's ludicrous. See the pressure on health right now to be having people doing meaningless tests to tick boxes when it's evident he has a learning disability. It was unbelievably frustrating. So there has to be something. Again, it's a quick process when they can just remove some of these layers that don't need to be there for families.
Excellent provider in my constituency who I know has supported young people for no payment because the delays were so excessive around getting that diagnosis of a learning disability and accessing direct payments. They just took them. So I mean that we should not be operating like that.
We definitely need to understand that sort of difficulty, disability sort of, where the crux of it is, because otherwise what you're going to face is we talk about the statement and then parents feeling that they need to rush to get a statement. Now the next stage is going to be parents taking the statement and feeling they need to rush to get a particular word into it, and it's just going to, that's madness. And it's process driven madness. So
complete
it's
opposite of what we're looking for, which is child centred. It's completely process driven, and I agree. So look, let's get those questions away. Look, I don't really offer apology for how far over time we are. It was absolutely right that we took the time there, but I am now going to make a really genuine call to members to please work with me for the remainder of the session so that we can get through the evidence in better time, because obviously we also have a responsibility not to keep witnesses waiting, which we've already done, so there's apologies on that. I think that disposes of item 6 if members are agreed, and then we can move on to item 7. So that is in relation to both the private members' bills under consideration by the committee, and it's a briefing from the examiner of statutory rules, so you're very welcome to come forward. It will be enclosed, yes. I'm just referring members to the delegated powers paper for both the Irish Medium Education Workforce Planning Bill at page 59 of tabled papers, and for the Education Holiday Meals Payments Bill at page 63 of tabled papers. As we're hearing directly from the examiner in relation to legal matters in these bills, can I propose we hear this session enclosed? Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Is that the live feedback on? That's us. Okay, so we're back into open session of the committee, and just to confirm for the record, we received a briefing from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. A number of technical issues around the drafting of the bill were highlighted, but members agreed that it would be appropriate to hear the departmental evidence, which is our next item, to get a sense of the department's position around any potential amendments to the bill on a technical basis before we make any decisions on how best to take those forward. And on that basis, we'll move on to item 8. So item 8 on the agenda. Apologies. There is actually item 8 on the agenda, which is not the department at this stage. It was to be another briefing from the Examiner of Statutory Rules, and that was in relation to our SEN regulations. However, the Examiner has informed us that she would prefer to update the committee at the point that the regs are laid, and that would be pending ongoing scrutiny of the committee. So if members are content to pause that process until those regulations are laid, we can move on to the next item if we're agreed. Agreed? Okay, so apologies for the confusion there. It's now item 9 on the agenda, and this is an oral briefing from departmental officials on the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill. I would refer members to the briefing note at page 70 of table papers, and I would like to welcome Eamon McConville, Director of Transport and Food in Schools from the department, and Jonathan Boyd, Head of Food in Schools team. So you're very welcome here today, and we've just come out of a closed session briefing with the Examiner of Statutory Rules, where a couple of technical issues were also discussed, but it was noted in that session, I think, that all members appreciated your briefing. It came in a very very constructive spirit, and I think it was very much appreciated. So look, I'm happy to invite you to brief committee, and then we can move to question and answer, unless you feel it's appropriate to move straight into question and answer.
Just very short remarks, Chair. So the committee, as you say, has received the department's letter just highlighting the drafting issues that we've identified, and that's based on our consideration of the legal advice that we've received since the last time we were here. All of the information in that accompanying table we think is important for the committee's scrutiny, but there's just a couple that we think is probably worth highlighting, and we may well be covering ground here that we've already covered, but the first one's in section 1A, and it's the use of the phrase "in lieu of." We just believe that could have an unintended consequence, preventing people who's already received a payment from receiving an actual free school meal on a day where they've returned to school before the end of at an earlier date. So again, the example we've used is where a holiday meal payment has been made for all weekdays over the summer holiday period from the 1st of July to 31st of August. But if the child returns to school on the 31st of August, then as drafted, technically that could mean that the child's not entitled to a free school meal. And I suppose that's just in the legal sort of terms, as that in lieu of means in place of. Secondly, there's the issue in the reference to the bill text to milk, meals or other refreshments, and I know that text is used in Article 58 of the bill, of the order. It's not specifically in the context of what a free school meal comprises. the free school meal enables a pupil to access a main course, dessert or fruit. It doesn't include a drink, as fresh drinking water is available in the canteens. The next issue is just in relation to the bill as drafted, and it's in relation to the single identifiable value for a holiday meal payment to be determined for post-primary pupils. The Education Authority's current post-primary canteen list has 44 individually priced items. There is the meal of the day, which currently is priced at £2.60, and then that can be combined with a dessert at 74p, and that comes to the 3.34, and that's the daily allowance given to a free school meal pupil. The bill is currently drafted. There's a single price paid for a meal by all paying post-primary pupils, but that's not the case, because a pupil could, for example, choose a soup and a filled baked potato for £3. But we believe for the bill to be workable, there needs to be a clearly defined price point that could be used for the value of a holiday meal payment. And the final point just is in relation to section 11E and the keeping of records. We believe there's already an established legislative framework in place that covers the retention and disposal of records by all public bodies in Northern Ireland. So just from a good drafting practice, to restate these is not best practice. Chair, I'm conscious that we've provided the table of all the drafting issues we've identified. I'm also conscious that the committee had asked for proposed amended text, but at this stage I'm not able to provide that to the committee. So that's it, Chair. Really just wanted to highlight those, and very happy to take questions.
It's been very helpful. I just want to reiterate that the correspondence with the committee was very helpful, very clear, and I think we're all I'm certainly clear in my mind of the issues that are being highlighted. I might just want to sort of separate out into two categories. We've got things that I think are all very much technical and around ensuring that the bill actually has the intended effect. And then there is one I wanted just to flag in terms of commencement, which I think the bill sponsor, and I don't want to speak for the bill sponsor, and I'm sure he will raise this himself, but had highlighted commencement in terms of evidence that he gave the committee as having been very deliberately chosen, but it has been flagged by the department as there could be issues around timings of commencement orders, so I'd maybe just separate the two out. But in leaving commencement aside, all of those sort of technical amendments, I suppose that the question that really arises from the last briefing we had as well is, would the department be of a mind to be providing these amendments for committee to consider, or is this sort of we've left it with you, now you need to go and tidy it up? So it is a genuine question around whether that is that work something the department anticipates doing to work with the committee on the bill, or we need to also make a decision, are we better to engage the bill's office at this stage?
Yeah, so I mean, as you'll know, it's up to a minister to decide whether or not to bring an amendment forward.
You got a steer from the minister on that at all? I mean, has the minister provided any direction?
We provided the analysis, yes. But at this stage, no instructions have been sent to OLC.
Okay. Well, we'll pick that up, I think, in terms of how we proceed at this stage. So the other issue then, just to pick up on the commencement issue, because you didn't speak to that directly, would you be able just to clarify, just for the record, so we've got that, and then we can have a consideration about where the committee sits with that, what the department's specific concerns around how commencement is set out in the bill?
I think it's in relation really to the timing. The bill, if it's passed by the Assembly before it rises for the election, the normal time scale for a royal assent is around 1 month. And those circumstances, the issue that we have raised would not be relevant. However, if royal assent were to be received just before a holiday period, the practicalities of laying a commencement order before the first day of the next relevant holiday period would be problematic. So if it was received, say for example, on the 30th of June and the 1st of July was so there's an issue there. I think there is a formulation that when it comes in automatically with royal assent, and then look after the commencement thereafter. But
that's helpful. So again, clearly no offer on the table here of drafting those amendments, but and I appreciate that sits with the minister, but I do understand that potentially from department's evidence and the bill sponsor's intent that there's maybe that there is not a meeting of minds around how quickly commencement should kick in terms of allowing the department to prepare. But do you think in terms of removing that requirement of the commencement order that it just comes automatically with royal assent is a way through just the technical issue around that? Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah. It would be to get everything in place. I think
yes.
we talked about that if it was coming so late in the day, that would you'd have to maybe do something in terms of back payment or something like that. But
add layers of complexity there potentially. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just not necessarily sure that it adds anything to have the commencement order if it's able to come into effect earlier.
Again, no, that's very helpful, very clear. So, open up to other members for any other questions. The Deputy Chair, did you want to come in as bill sponsor? Yeah, it's appropriate to bring in Danny. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's what I wanted. I wanted constructive feedback, so we're going to work to have the best draft. I know I've met you before. I laid out my policy intent. I knew some parts of it would have to be tidied up, and look, I'm going to work with the committee, work myself. I've said I will always work with the department and I'll work with the minister. I get maybe other priorities, and it would be my desire probably to do this through myself or the committee rather than wait on the minister making a call on the amendments. But I think there's enough from what you've given us to make sure we can go away to, may not agree with everything in it, but certainly there's some really good stuff there that I can work with the committee to make sure we get what we want, because I don't think anything that you have said takes away the policy intent. Look, the commencement side of it is I just think it would be really unfair on children and families if, say, it did fall that way and they didn't get payments over particularly the summer period, because that's probably, looking at it, be great if it was in for this Christmas, but no, wasteful thinking. But probably Easter, but definitely summer. I don't want to miss summer 27, so that's why the commencement side of it's important to me. But I do take the point that we can maybe do it in a different way that makes sure it still happens. So I'll certainly work to the best of my ability to address everything that you have brought forward, because even the payment, the 334, I even take your points around the examples. I was in 3 different schools in the last couple of weeks, and it's all different. In fact, you're saying you can get a meal for $2.50. The teacher was getting off to me saying, I only wanted to go down and grab the burger, but I'm still charged $3.34. So that it's things like that. So all schools are clearly doing different things in secondary. So happy enough to work on it, and I do appreciate it, because it was a lot better coming and being constructive and saying that my bill was harmful. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Danny. Any other members want to come in? I think we probably need a discussion around just how to proceed in terms of amendments, but it doesn't require the officials to remain for that. So if we're agreed, I'm happy to release you, and thank you for your time. And then we'll move into a discussion on how to proceed. So guidance from the clerk is we're fine, and you're absolutely grand to go. That's great. Yeah, thank you.
You got back on track a wee bit with your time.
Oh no, that's been brilliant. Yeah, bringing my blood pressure down a bit. Advice from the clerk is that if we do need to specifically engage with the Bills Office here to discuss capacity or a detail of amendments, we may need to move into close, but we're fine in open session at the moment. So my sense of that is obviously we need ministerial approval at departmental level around engagement on amendments, and I'm not sure in terms of the turnaround times on that if that would be to my mind the best way to proceed. So it might be that through whichever mechanism, via the bill sponsor or through committee, that we go through the Bills Office. But look, I'm happy to open up to other members for views on that. David?
I mean, is there any way in which you could make the offer to the department with the understanding that if there hasn't been correspondence back within a certain date, that we would advance with going to the Bills Office?
With the question, I suppose, if I could suggest that one, will you engage, and 2, how quickly will we have them if you do, because I think that is a crucial consideration. That's certainly worth bearing in mind. So
I mean, it means there's a sort of the safety net, I guess, from Danny's point of view, that it's not obstructing the bill, but it still gives the department, if they feel it's the appropriate choice, to go down that route.
I would have a slight concern, or I do feel in this mandate with legislation, both private members and executive, we are up against it, but obviously private members will not get the same priority as executive legislation. I would have a slight reservation on going down a route that could delay things, but I do take your point. That is a reasonable suggestion, so we can see. Donna, you wanted to come in? Michelle, I don't know if you were indicating, Michelle.
No, I take the point, but me personally, I'll go off and work, and I'll work with the committee, but I don't want to waste. Not waste. You're right with our time. We don't have loads of time, and I'd rather just get cracking into this as soon as possible rather than waiting on a letter coming back and forth. And I think they've given us enough there to go and take it up. I don't agree with everything, by the way, but there's plenty in it for me to work on.
No, I have to say, I think their briefing and the examiners that there's nothing that I'm scratching my head over or unsure of what the impact would be. So that's helpful. If I could just maybe ask the clerk in terms of a process, if we do decide just to go through the bills office and not approach the department, is that out with the normal process? Would it be advisable to still good practice to write even if we carry on?
Yeah, especially when they've highlighted these. They've done a bit of work on the bill for the committee, and but in the meantime we could prepare instructions to the bill office anyway. You would be doing that as well.
Yeah.
So we could ask the department to reply within 7 days.
Can I make a suggestion on that basis? If members are agreed that we write to the department, we make that request, and it would be framed in terms of, are they prepared to engage, and if they are, how quickly can they return those amendments? But alongside that, the bill sponsor has said that his intention is to go ahead and engage with the bills office, and that committee will obviously be more than content to receive any amendments arising out of that for consideration, and then we can review this once the date has expired for a departmental response. We agreed? Yeah. Agreed? Okay. Yeah. I'm going to suggest we are, by some miracle, now ahead of time, so I am going to propose a short comfort break and a return 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Just turn the live feed off.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.
Okay, members, so that is the live feedback on after the comfort break. So that takes us to item 10 on the agenda, and it's an oral briefing from Comhairle na Gael Scoileachta on the Irish Medium Workforce Plan Bill. So as the witnesses are just coming through, I would refer members to the clerk's cover note at page 119 of the main pack, and a briefing note from Comhairle at page 77 of table papers. So good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. I just have a quick bit of housekeeping just to cover on this item. So members, I do want to just draw to your attention the system that we have in place in this committee room regarding simultaneous interpretation of presentations made in Irish. For those in the meeting room, headsets are provided to hear a live translation provided by Hansard staff. Last week, simultaneous interpretation was not available for the evidence session we heard on this bill from the principals for those who were attending the meeting remotely. So the Assembly Communications team have created a solution for today's meeting should it be required, and they're working on a substantive solution going forward. But I understand today that we will be receiving the briefing in English, is that correct? Okay, so but if any member chooses to make their contribution in Irish, then hopefully for those joining online we will have that option to be able to access that, and apologies to any members who were unable to hear any of the evidence last week on that basis. So joining us today we have Maria Thomason, CEO of Comhairle, and we have Christine McCollum, Senior Education Officer, also with Comhairle. So you're both very welcome, and thank you for joining us today. So I was very surprised to be greeting you at the stage of the meeting. We thought we were going to run way over, but we've managed to recover a bit of time. So I think at this stage I will just invite you to make any opening presentation or opening remarks, and then we'll move to question and answer from there. But over to yourselves.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you all.
Thank you for the opportunity to brief you today. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that we have traditionally presented our evidence in Irish. However, and I know we've mentioned it, due to recent technical difficulties and to ensure accessibility for all members, we will present and respond in English today. My name is Maria Thomason, Príomh Éimeanach, Chief Executive of Comhairle na Gael Scoileachta, and I am joined by Christine McCollum, Senior Education Officer. Comhairle na Gael Scoileachta was established in the year 2000 to advise and support the Department of Education in fulfilling its statutory duty under Article 89 to encourage and facilitate the development of Irish medium education. We are here today for one clear purpose: to express our full and unequivocal support for the Irish Medium Education Workforce Plan Bill. This bill is essential. It introduces the statutory mechanism that has been missing for decades, a requirement to plan strategically for the workload, for the workforce needed to sustain and grow the Irish medium sector. Irish medium education is an immersion model, a globally recognised, evidence-based form of bilingual education, where all subjects are taught through Irish. The language is not simply encouraged, it is the vehicle through which pupils access the curriculum. IME serves both first and second language learners within one model. Internationally, immersion is well established, with clear pedagogies and training requirements. Parents choose it because it works, delivering strong academic outcomes, enhanced communication and cognitive skills, increased confidence and cultural awareness, and successful examination performance. These outcomes underpin the sector's sustained growth. In practice, immersion integrates language and learning. Pupils move from understanding to using language, supported by structured teaching, visual aids and interaction. Children are particularly suited to this approach, and it supports not only language acquisition but wider cognitive development. This model has implications for delivery, including class size, where intensive interaction and structured support may require smaller groups. Ongoing research by Queen's University will further inform workforce and planning needs, and we expect to launch that in the autumn. Immersion requires a curriculum design which is adapted to reflect the realities of the immersion setting, specifically for this model. It cannot be a simple translation of an English medium framework. While a draft version of the new curriculum is due on the 16th of June, it does not include Irish medium adaptations. This work remains at an early stage. The appointment of an Irish medium lead advisor in terms of curriculum reform is welcome within the department, but one individual cannot address system-wide gaps, resulting from decades of limited planning. Progress depends on practitioner input, yet teacher shortages severely limit participation. This is reflected also in the absence of Irish medium representation on the original curriculum task forces that began working in autumn 25. As a result, there is a real risk of delay in ensuring the curriculum reflects immersion practice. The same constraints apply to developing support materials. This has wider consequences: delayed access for pupils, reduced professional learning for teachers, and negative impacts on recruitment and retention. In the absence of resources, teachers must create or translate materials themselves, increasing workload and reinforcing an unsustainable cycle. On assessment, progress is underway. The need for Irish medium tools has been recognised and development work is progressing. However, the key issue is capacity. Delivering immersion-appropriate curriculum, assessment and resources at scale requires a workforce with the necessary expertise, something that does not currently exist in sufficient numbers. Without workforce planning, the system cannot deliver aligned curriculum, assessment and resources. A critical gap exists in SEN provision. There are no Irish medium specialists within local impact teams, educational psychology or advisory services. As a result, Irish medium schools must access SEN support through English. Pupils are assessed in a language that is not their primary language of learning, increasing the risk of misidentification, delayed intervention and negative impacts on attainment, well-being and confidence. Teachers must adapt English medium interventions, often without specialist training, increasing workload and undermining immersion delivery. This also disrupts linguistic continuity and weakens Irish language development. This situation directly undermines the SEN reform agenda. In practice, IM pupils do not consistently receive support from the right people at the right time or through the language of learning, creating structural inequity. CNAG has proposed a pragmatic model, a small cohort of specialist IM staff supporting the LIT teams on a liaison basis, but this itself reflects workforce constraints. Without workforce planning, equitable SEN provision cannot be achieved. The need for this bill is grounded in clear evidence from CNAG, Stranmillis and Queen's University. Workforce pressures are systemic, interconnected and increasing across all phases. At early years, over 90% of pupils come from non-Irish speaking homes, making these settings critical for language development. Classroom assistants and nursery staff are essential to delivery, yet there is a very limited pipeline of qualified Irish speaking staff. Recruitment relies on a small pool, training pathways are limited and retention is affected by lack of progression. This disrupts continuity and increases pressure on schools. At primary level, workload is a major issue. Teachers face additional immersion-related demands, including creating and translating resources. Evidence shows that 82% of our workforce work over 40 hours weekly, 28% work over 50 hours weekly, and 90% of our workforce report impacts on well-being. This is driving attrition. At post-primary, the challenge is even greater. There is a widening gap in subject specialist supply, particularly in STEM and vocational areas. The absence of a dedicated IM teacher education pathway is central. The current PGCE enhancement route lacks scale and structure. While bursaries are welcome, they are limited without a standalone pathway. Evidence shows a clear disconnect between training and recruitment, with schools unable to source teachers through existing routes. Across all phases, substitute shortages further limit schools' capacity to engage in professional learning or system development. Taken together, early years provision is under strain, workload is driving attrition, post-primary supply is structurally insufficient. These are not isolated challenges. They reflect a system that has not planned for immersion education ever. We acknowledge progress by the department, including the development of an IME strategy. However, these are baseline measures, not preferential treatment. A strategy is important, but it has no legislative force. It cannot compel delivery. We have seen strategies before that fail to translate into sustained change. The current timeline also falls outside the mandate of the current executive, which is creating massive uncertainty. This is why the Workforce Plan Bill is critical. A strategy sets intent, legislation creates obligation. The bill will require the department to plan for long-term workforce needs, model the supply needs, address shortages, and report on progress. It does not replace the strategy, it ensures it is delivered. Article 89 applies across all arm's length bodies of the Department of Education, yet there is no consistent oversight to ensure services meet IME needs. This leads to gaps in curriculum, assessment and support. The bill enables a system-wide approach, ensuring those delivering services have the required language skills and expertise. Without this, IME will continue to rely on structures not designed for it. CNG is well placed to support this work with direct sector engagement and expertise, and should play a central role in workforce planning. I want to be clear that the recruitment and retention and the lack of teacher supply and staff supply more generally in our sector is the single biggest barrier facing the development of the Irish medium education sector. Children in Irish medium education deserve a high quality system designed to meet their needs. The sector's distinctiveness is not a challenge, it is an asset. Immersion education brings innovation, strengthens language and learning, and can benefit the wider system. But it depends very much on having the right workforce. This bill will enable that strategic planning and align supply and demand, strengthen SEM provision, support recruitment and retention, embed IME expertise across the wider education system, and deliver Article 89. Without it, growth, quality and equity cannot be sustained. Comhairle na Gaelscoileachta stands ready to support delivery. We strongly support this bill and urge the committee to do the same. Thank
you, Maria. So I think, as I said when we had evidence on this bill last week, I'm very much comfortable with the provisions in this bill, and I don't have any particular interest in sort of going through the its principles and whether or not they're appropriate or not. I'm convinced of the need for this and that it's an important intervention. But the issue that I picked up with the principals last week, I'd like to do the same with yourselves, and it's particularly in relation to SEN at EA level, because I think there's maybe an assumption when we talk about workforce that we're talking about teachers and classroom assistant, school facing, direct frontline teaching. But you have referenced there no Irish medium expertise in the lit teams, no Irish medium expertise in the educational psychology team. Can you set out what the impact of those gaps, what the impact of that is on the sector?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair, for your question. I'm going to ask Christine, who's leading on this work and has done an awful amount of work in this space, to come in on here, but it's certain that the impacts are wide-reaching and extremely concerning.
So I'll start off by talking a little bit about the collaborative work that we've been taking forward with the SEN Transformation Team and the Education Authority. We've been collaborating with them over recent months around how support can be ensured through the Irish medium specialists on the local impact teams. It's very clearly stated in the 5-year, the SEN Reform Agenda 5-year delivery plan, that were appropriate, is the exact wording, that the Irish medium schools or Irish medium pupils will be supported. So to really look at the structures within EA, we're expecting schools to use the graduated response to move through the different steps of support that children need. And if I start at the very sort of pre-stage 1 of the graduated response, SENCOs and schools are expected to ensure provision mapping is appropriate and that they are able to support children for all of the overarching SEN categories. Now, without appropriate TPL for cognition and learning, for example, without appropriate TPL that can support teachers or support classroom assistants in supporting pupils who are presenting with literacy difficulties or numeracy difficulties in the classroom, they have no support there to support them in the first instance. If you move on to the stage 1 of the code of practice, and we're providing reasonable adjustments for pupils or providing some type of in-school intervention, our schools are reporting that there are English medium resources available, the likes of the Maths Recovery Programme, where teachers and assistants have been out on the training, but they are very specific in the type of language and the exact language that you use when you're using a Maths Recovery Programme. The same could be said for the literacy support. If there is a child experiencing literacy difficulty in their classroom, there are programmes out there like Conquering Literacy, the Alpha, the Omega, interventions that are ready-made and ready to use in a monolingual system. So these always need to be adapted in some way or translated in some way so that teachers or SENCOs can use them for that in-school provision. That brings us then to the outside support from outside agencies and more specifically the Education Authority. As Maria has already alluded to, there are no SEN specialists that have been specifically recruited to support Irish medium pupils. We did have, there are some positives, some very positive collaboration happening between ourselves and the Education Authority over recent months, where an early assessment tool was put together by the EA literacy service team, but it was for use for early intervention. It's to specifically find out where a child's struggling so that schools or EA staff can provide early intervention. So you're talking about primary, the third term in primary 3, third term of primary 2 or early in primary 3, but in Irish medium schools all of the lessons, the whole curriculum is delivered through the medium of Irish, so it's not appropriate actually for staff to come in and support through the medium of English. We have we're now in the space where there are 4 specialists seconded out for a 3-day-a-week period. They were seconded out for February and March for 3 days a week to develop or translate this assessment tool. Now, this is not by no means a diagnostic assessment tool. This is just an assessment tool that can be used to inform, short intervention. It will not diagnose a child with any difficulties. We have no assessment tools that are fit for purpose that educational psychologists can use, and that has come out clearly in the report from the department. Educational psychologists, they come in and they assess children through the medium of English, which is absolutely inappropriate when all of the learning for those first 3 years and beyond that in the nursery is happening through the medium of Irish. We have been working collaboratively, like I've said, with the Education Authority, and we have put a proposal to them. There are 28 local impact teams, and this is where it becomes important with the workforce planning bill here. We couldn't release 28 SEN specialists from our sector. We wouldn't have 28 SEN specialists to release in to support each and every one of these local impact teams. We've had to be more creative and come up with a proposal to release a small cohort of possibly 5 to work on a liaison basis with all 28 local impact teams, where they can support and shine sort of an Irish medium lens on anything that any support that is needed within.
It's slightly like a stick and plaster approach rather than a planned approach, which is really so often the evidence we hear across a range of issues impacting IME. So I just wanted to ask one follow-up question, and it was just to ask, and you've been very, very clear in your support for the bill, do you have any concerns in terms of just ensuring that the workforce plan would bring the EA into scope? Because it's very clear that it covers workforce, that's a teaching function. Is there any concern about potentially needing to tighten anything up just to ensure that EA are consulted with and that the EA workforce supporting Irish medium schools is included? Is that something that you'd considered at all?
Well, I think, as I said, the statutory duty, with or without the workforce plan, all arm's length bodies, we all have to report at the end of each quarter how we're fulfilling each of the statutory duties. So I think there's a lack of coordination in general across all arm's length bodies. Even within the EA, there's a very small team within the Education Directorate who look at sectoral support. And they kind of are the go-to. I feel sorry for them at times because every directorate comes and said, oh, that's their job, when actually it applies to everyone. So I think there's a couple of things there, Chair. I think absolutely, we may see challenges in manning what needs to happen, but I also think that's why we need this strategic plan. We needed the joined up thinking that if we're bringing more through the sector, then there's more opportunity. We don't have a surplus at the moment, but if we could get to a place where we are recruiting enough and more, and that it just goes beyond the teaching and the support, it has to be how many people are needed in EA across directorates, how many people are needed in SIA, how many people are needed in, I'm going to make an argument for Cornea.
Maybe my question was too rambling, and just to focus it in, do you think there needs to be a specific reference in the bill to ensure that EA support end of things in relation to saying is definitely included, that there's no get out for the department to say, well, we've just looked at teachers?
I don't think it would do any harm. I mean, we have looked at it through it and think that it is broad enough. It doesn't specify what the workforce is for the IME sector, but it doesn't. It doesn't preclude them. But I don't see it would do any harm because we have been wrangling in the past. I'm not sure if I've discussed this at committee, but we have wrangled in the past with, specifically in that space with the EA a couple of years ago, of the opinion that the statutory duty applied to the department, not to them. So unless, I suppose, there is an argument to be made that unless it is specifically referenced there could be a bit of wrangling, and we don't have time for that. We need to make sure that when this hopefully passes through all the stages, that we hit the ground running and that everybody knows what their responsibility is under the terms of this bill. So
that's helpful, and look, maybe something the bill sponsor wants to speak to, and perhaps we can discuss on the back of this evidence session. But thank you for your time there. I'll bring Deputy Chair at this stage.
I was Filter.
Thank you, and you're very welcome.
Put my questions as Gaelic, but the question I want to ask is important insofar as it's mostly those, I'm not specifically referring to anybody in the committee, but people who may be opposed to this bill are people who don't have any fluency in Irish, and I want you to answer a question about the main argument people are using for opposing this bill. Just first of all, it was my intention at the start of this mandate to bring forward an Irish medium education bill, which would have been much more wide-ranging than this. It would have taken into account resources for Irish medium, assessment, materials and accommodation also. But you're probably aware the Speaker made a ruling that private members' bills needed to be narrowly focused, and we thought that the workforce issue was probably one of the most important issues. And you said yourself, it's going to be hard for the sector to develop without changes being made to workforce recruitment and retention and so on. But anyway, to get back to the point, the opposition to this bill is coming from people who think or who believe that if this bill passes into legislation, it will give an unfair advantage to the Irish medium sector. What do you have to say to that?
So I don't agree with that. I think I said in my opening remarks, it's not about preferential treatment. It's about, some of this is about putting in, you know, the most basic of baseline measures to bring us up to power. So I know, having watched, I liked the analogy that I think Mihal made last week, the idea of a child in a classroom with, you know, a statement of an additional need, and they are allocated additional support. It's not that, you know, the child sitting beside that person with additional supports is disadvantaged. It's a recognition that this child needs something different. I think as sectors we all have very distinct challenges. As a young sector, there are many things in terms of infrastructure and support that we don't have, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that we need more, because you know, we're constantly wrangling with the conversation about accommodation, and that has massive impacts on, for example, not only our ability to grow current provision, but also to engage, for example, with SPIMS provision or specialist provision in our schools. Not only do our schools not have accommodation, many of our sites don't even have the space to receive, even with the additional additional capital budget. So I think it's about understanding that we're in a different position. We're starting in a very different place. I know that there's also an argument that we have a statutory duty, and that already gives that preferential treatment, but we have had, you know, a Judge Tracy ruling, we have had a Drumrah judgment that also applies to us that came through the integrated sector, that the statutory duty should be more than aspirational, and unfortunately it is very much still in that aspirational space. So we will often get the line back from the department that the department is very cognizant of the statutory duty to encourage and facilitate the development of Irish medium education. But what I'm not clear on, and I'm thinking specifically in capital call lists or, you know, things in the past, where preference was given, say, to schools who were closing to amalgamate. And obviously we're not in that space, we're a growing sector, we don't fit in the area planning. The whole raison d'etre of area planning is to rationalise the school estate. It doesn't work for a young, growing, developing sector. So in our space, I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? So if you're sitting in early years in the department, or you're sitting in curriculum in the department, or you're sitting in area planning in the department, what, as an official, are you sure what you need to be doing to show what this cognizance means? We nearly need like a test set of like Section 75, you know, that framework of, yes, I've applied, yes, I've due diligence. That doesn't exist. So I think that saying that we have that already in the statutory duty, if that was working, we wouldn't have this bill. You know, I suppose Pat wouldn't have had to bring this bill to the floor. So I think that all sectors have distinctive needs. We see that most recently in the current and recent debate about the need for a controlled schools unit. You know, there is, if you look at all of that, you know, the workings around that, there's an acknowledgement that controlled schools are not getting what they require currently, and it's, you know, placed in against the likes of what CCMS are providing for Catholic maintained schools, and that there's a feeling that controlled schools are not receiving that from the Education Authority. So I can't understand how that can be accepted, but that there can't, and acknowledged, and that there can't be an acknowledgement that actually this is an equity piece. I've said this before committee, and I don't like using the same analogy, but there's some new faces, so they won't have heard it before. I suppose it's like giving, you know, we have this conversation about the difference between equality and equity. You know, equality is giving every child a shoe. Equity is giving every child a shoe that fits. You know, it's not. I just can't fathom. I just can't fathom that, and I don't agree with it. I think that it's not about putting one sector. And also, I should actually say here, and it's remiss of me not to say, and I know Diarmuid mentioned this last week. It's not the Irish medium sector, the integrated sector, the controlled sector, the voluntary grammar sector, the Catholic maintained sector. I'm trying to think which one of them I missed out. Because Irish medium education traverses all sectors. So it's the English medium system and the Irish medium system. We have provision in voluntary grammar, we have provision in integrated, we have provision in controlled, we have provision in maintained, and we also have the majority of our schools in other maintained. So I just think the level of need reflects what is required. And that's what I think is in this bill. So that would be my answer to that. I'm not sure, Christine, if you had anything. And you know, we've already mentioned about SEN, but that's obviously really pertinent as well. It's the SEN piece, I suppose, is the shoe analogy. And we hear that all the time. Our services are available to all schools, but if it doesn't work and it doesn't fit, that's a false narrative, and it has to be challenged.
You do just need to draw it to a close there, and
No,
then
that's
to
all I
add,
have,
Deputy
Chair.
Chair.
Thank you.
No, that's
Thanks,
fine.
Mayor.
So Cara, you had indicated there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Gurmagat, to the panel for being here today. And I just have really one question, which is about retention. So in the previous panel last week, they had talked about there's a rise, a growth in young, talented Irish speakers who want to go into the Irish medium sector, and they're going to Australia, or often what we do see is going down south. Maybe the conditions or the pay are better and it seems a bit more attractive than here in the north. Can you speak to that? Obviously, you've talked at length about the workload and the stress that they're experiencing. Key points to drive home to the Minister, I think, for us as a committee is to really hone in and see the importance of this bill. But is there anything else that you'd like to add about why you think retention is a key issue?
Yep, Cara, thank you very much for your question. I think it's important to note, just first and foremost, if we look at the BEd, the 4-year BEd pathway for primary school, there are 18 places on the BEd primary pathway, and it's a 4-year course. Now, before we get to the sort of retention piece, when the graduates graduate and when they're ready to, to take up post, it's important to note that we have been looking at this with the Irish Medium ITE provider, and it has come to our attention that there are small numbers, very small numbers, maybe 1, 2 or 3 graduates nearly every year who, by the time it comes to the 3rd year, they transfer across into the English medium BEd course. And there are a number of reasons for that. We're working our way through that with the ITE provider. First 2 years, for example, their school experience is all in English medium, so they are working with a plethora of resources that are available to English medium schools. Teacher professional learning, obviously is mostly based on a monolingual system. And when they get to the 3rd year, where students might start the 3rd year in the Irish medium course, it very quickly becomes evident to them that there's an additional set of competencies needed to teach in an Irish medium school. So that's the first point I want to make. You've mentioned there that some of our students or some of our graduates do go abroad, and they take up opportunities to travel and to enjoy life, maybe in the sunshine, something that we're that we're not often afforded here. And we do, we would absolutely not be stopping students or graduates from taking up those opportunities and from living life and from, they will all draw from those experiences. But I think the important point to make here, Cara, is that when they return after 5 years, 10 years, it's often more difficult to entice them back into our sector, back into Irish medium schools. A lot of graduates or a lot of teachers have reported sort of a loss in confidence, in their language competence. Other teachers then have gotten used to teaching, in English medium schools, in British schools abroad, again, where resources that they're not having to translate or transadapt. There's a lot of sort of transadapting and translating that these words are thrown about all the time when we're talking about immersion education, because we don't have a fully resourced curriculum. I understand that we're moving into sort of curriculum reform and we're in that space, and that is exciting for us as a sector. We do see opportunity here. We hope that we will have a fully resourced curriculum, but at the minute with this sort of 20-year curriculum, we're not actually in that space just yet. Support then in terms of teacher professional learning, I've already mentioned, it is much easier to receive teacher professional learning through the medium of English, and for a lot of the time we do have to. My experience, I'm here today as Senior Education Officer of Comhairle na Gaelscoil Acta, but it's important to let you know that my experience is as a 17 years of teaching in Irish medium schools. That has taken on different coordinator roles, numeracy literacy coordinator, and most recently then under my role as vice principal, pastoral care and the SEN role as well. So we do try to adapt some of those teacher professional learning, that are available through the Education Authority, and make them fit for purpose for Irish medium schools. But that's not always, it's not an easy task. 15%, we have sort of anecdotal evidence in our paper, Ensuring Effective Teacher Supply for the Irish Medium Sector, the 2023 paper. And anecdotal evidence would suggest that 15% of our graduates then move into English medium schools. Again, for the reasons that I've outlined. Border counties then, if anybody lives in a border county, there are better conditions and higher pay in the schools in the south. And Irish medium schools, across the border have just recently reintroduced a teaching allowance that gives cognizance to the additional workload as well. And, that has all been outlined, and I know Maria mentioned that in her speech at the start there, just, the independent review on workload and independent research that was carried out by Stranmillis University College as well. I think as well it is important to raise the lack of, or the absence of appropriate teacher training for post-primary schools. At the minute, we have mentioned bursaries, and while they're very welcome, the demand for the courses, or the courses are not meeting the demand in schools. There doesn't seem to be any joined up thinking between the ATE providers and the schools as to where are the gaps, and those gaps will change over time. Teachers will retire, teachers will go out on maternity, teachers will be on long-term sick, but there just doesn't seem to be any joined up strategic thinking as to what type of subjects specialists do we need. That brings me then to the pathways question as well. Sorry, Nick, there's just so much to cover, and there's so many holes to plug. There are 8 ATE places for post-primary PGCE, but you have to apply to either Ulster University or Queen's University, be placed on those courses, and then show an interest in the Irish Medium Enhancement course then, the certificate with St Mary's University College. So we're finding that teachers are going from maybe primary trained ATE courses into plug gaps in post-primary schools as general teachers, or with maybe a background in Irish, where other pathways haven't been available to them. They can't study Irish with maths or Irish with science. Then they are being sort of thrown in, they're being retrained within their profession, and that is at the expense of the school. We heard last week from both Micheál and James that they are having to be innovative within their schools in trying to retrain these teachers to best support the pupils, so that they can provide not only a Key Stage 3, but provide for the entitlement framework, for the range of subjects at GCSE and A level as well.
We'll just have to
Sorry,
draw this.
Nick.
No, you're okay.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And I think you've really just placed out there the importance of future-proofing Irish medium education and the gaps that still exist. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cara. Look, I appreciate it. There's so much to cover on these issues, but we'll maybe just to try and remind members and witnesses to try and keep each contribution to about 5 minutes per member. Cathy, you'd indicated next.
Thank you. Christine, August, Maria. I want to just pick up back on the point that Pat was making around, a number of things that have been said as to why we don't need this bill. And we've heard from the department and the minister, in fact, that, there's an Irish medium strategy coming, so we don't need this. This isn't required. This isn't needed. This is, the Irish medium strategy is being developed, so we'll not worry about this. What would you say to that?
I did say a little bit about that in my opening remarks, Cathy, and thank you for the question, because I do think it warrants a little bit more of digging into that. I suppose the big issue is that the strategy does not have any legislative protection around it. So, like other strategies, it may lie never without ever being implemented on the shelf of the department. Unfortunately, we have experience of that. If you look at the review of Irish medium education from 2008 and the work that we did, I think it's 2 years ago now, time just flies round, definitely 2, reviewing that review, and that all actions or recommendations remain either unimplemented or just partially implemented. I don't think there was any green on that rag. So there's that initial concern that what will happen with this strategy. But the bigger concern, I suppose, that predates all of that is, will the strategy ever see the light of day? The Minister acknowledged, and I should have said this in answer to the Vice Chair's question, the Minister did acknowledge the need for additionality and support within our sector and the need to look at things strategically. That's why he gave approval for the strategy work to begin in the first instance. But whilst he did that, and of course we welcome it, it was clear from the outset this strategy will not be launched within this mandate. So the initial time frame is mid-2027, which is post-election. Will another minister come in and take this and run with it, or will it just fall down the list of priorities? There is no money aligned to the strategy. I know, there's a modest amount of money in looking at this bill, but there's no money at all. We are looking at 7-pillar model within the strategy. We have now been working on this for a year passed in April, and we're on pillar 3. I'm not sure we're going to get another 4 pillars done before, in the deadline. I also noted, disappointingly, the comments from the department that if this bill goes ahead, that this may have implications on the strategy. So there's a massive concern about, will this even come to pass? I would say that the strategy work has been positive in many ways. There's a working group that comes together monthly. I sit on a steering group. Unfortunately, we've only met twice, which is also concerning because that is slowing down the ability to progress the recommendations of the working group. But there is an opportunity to come together in the department. I definitely feel are learning more about our sector. They're understanding the issues because it is a deep dive into initially accommodation and infrastructure, for example. The next one was the teacher supply piece. So I worry that it'll be a wish list. I also am very concerned, and I've said from the outset that I'm concerned about, I've been told that we are a group of very informed key stakeholders around the table. I worry that we're all conflicted around that table because the department have said from the outset that this strategy must be modest, achievable and affordable. And I am of the opinion that it needs to be ambitious, it needs to meet the emerging needs of our sector, and we need an independent view on that. We have independent panels all over the place in education, looking at curriculum, looking at assessment, looking at workload. Why can we not have an independent view on this strategy? And it's not something we've progressed very far. So I think that for all those reasons, I'm concerned about the strategy and where it is heading. It's definitely something that sits nicely alongside the bill, but I think the bill is stronger. I think I would, if I was betting, I'd put my money on the strategy making a difference, or the bill making a difference, rather than the strategy.
It's actually, well, I wouldn't use the word funny that you say that, because we've heard recently at a conference that the Minister actually said himself that the department is full of strategies that are sitting on a shelf gathering dust.
Yes, I heard that. Yeah.
So yeah. I suppose the fear then would be that this would be another one. Would it be fair to say then, just to round it up, that if the strategy is developed, it could be a set of ambitions that might or might not come to fruition, but this would have a legislative underpinning that there would be an obligation to deliver this?
I mean, the strategy is what we should do. This bill, in my understanding, is what the department should do, but this bill is what the department must do too. So,
thank
you. David, you'd indicated.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation. Pick up actually on one thing that Kathy said at the end there, and that's that, and I hadn't heard the Minister say it, but that the department is full of strategies gathering dust. I would go further. It's not just the education department that's full of strategies gathering dust. This building has been apparent to me since I got here is full of strategies gathering dust, and that's largely because there's huge resource pressures. So, and it would take me back to the point that was made. I actually think it's a realistic thing for the department, and I wish all departments would approach it, because it's very nice to go out to the voters and say, look at this grand sort of suite of ideas of what in an ideal world we would all do. But I actually think if more of our strategies and plans in this place were step by step, modest and achievable, we might actually get somewhere. The problem is that we understand that we have resource pressures. The Department of Education looking into 600 million deficit in next year, and we all, and probably all political parties are guilty of it, are quite keen to list all of these new things we want added to the list of things we do when we can't pay for what we have at the moment. I think that's an issue. And so it brings me then to, I have a lot of sympathy with, I wasn't even going to come in because I think we've done a lot of the issues in other sessions, but you were talking about the amalgamation of schools and how Pat often refers to the statutory duty in terms of Irish medium education. We're going to see increasing pressure to sort of rationalise schools through amalgamation and other methods because we will have a significant drop in children. That's a strategic pressure the department is going to face going forward. Why then, when we're looking at that, do you feel that first in the queue at every point must be Irish medium education? Is that what you think? And I don't want to put words in your mouth on that, but there are other pressures that are going to, that our whole education system across Northern Ireland is going to face that have to be dealt with. Do you not think there's a danger that if we say here's one sector and they must always be prioritised, that we never actually get to the work of reforming the system?
I'm not sure where to start on that because I was halfway through thinking, listening to you there. Thank you for the question. And I should have made notes as I was going, so if there's anything I don't pick up on, come back to me. First of all, I have two roles for my SINs. I am Chief Executive Officer and I'm also Accounting Officer for the organisation, so I'm acutely aware of budget pressures. I would say that our budget is extremely, we don't have the ability to overspend. We're not allowed to go beyond our budget as other bodies do, so there's very little room for us to manoeuvre. 85% of our budget goes on salary, so it's very small and we're a tiny fish in the big pot, but we do our bit. So I suppose I'm not saying that Irish medium needs to be first in the queue. I'm saying that everybody needs to be looked at in the round. So on the issue of the declining birth rate, I think we make up approximately just over 3% of the overall education population. So whilst there's every other sector is at their ceiling, we have a massive amount of headroom to grow. We have a lot of places to go to grow, and there's a 97% chance of growth for us. So it's a bit different for us in terms of our sector continues to develop while other sectors diminish. There are conversations that we have been having about community schools in the future and what do they look like, and we're very open to having those conversations as long as there's not a kind of I'm trying to think of the word in Merla, in English, sorry. There needs to be, IME needs to be in that. What does it look like if there's a community, in a community, what's the SEM provision, what's the IM provision? If parents and the community want that, that's not the space we're in. We're in this idea of, we've got, we're still in that, of that place. So I don't think that it's, well, first of all, we've got the Tracy judgment that says that it shouldn't be just aspirational. So the statutory duty does allow the department to go further and to do more. That's not always the case. I don't think that we have ever seen our sector being, taken from other sectors. I think that.
Would you accept the department's not able to meet its aspirations across the board?
Yes, absolutely. But I think that that's why this bill is measured and moderate, and I think that it could have been, and I would argue it should have been, much greater. We should have accommodation in there. We should have, that's why our schools can't get involved in SPIMS, because we're not in a position to go and buy new sites, and there's no money in the sector. We are absolutely and utterly not meeting any of the demand that is out there for Irish medium education. We are not in a position to engage with communities who are knocking our door regularly wanting new Irish medium provision because there's no money to do so. So it's not that we are able to, we're still reactively responding. We're not able to work proactively. We have a very small team. We've lost members of our team as our sector and the demand for our services have grown. So Absolutely, but I think we have, as I said at the start, we've played our part. We're not going over budget. We're not going out there and being reckless with what we are doing. Our business plans and all of that are very tight. So I just think that I don't think that the Irish medium sector is causing the deficit within the wider piece. And I don't mean to put one sector over another. I don't mean that we're special. I mean that I don't, if support is required, we need to, what does the proportionality of support look like for that sector? And there's no proportionality. It's just
Chair's mind, because I just want to explain that it's quite often framed that there's hostility from the union side. I have no problem with anyone who wants our medium education accessing that. I have genuine and I see some of the genuine issues that you face, particularly trying to recruit specialists that other schools struggle to, but you also have an additional ask of them. I get that. But so many of the things you list, I also see within my own constituency, and therefore it's hard for me to justify making a difference between. And I often quote Donald High School, but I won't walk around a school like that. It's falling apart at times and needs additional, and it's how we balance those needs across the system, and I just think it should be done on an equal basis. But and I'm sure there's different arguments around that. Thank you, thanks, Chair.
Just going to come back and say that the fact that the Minister has stood up, and I think actually on Monday again spoke about the acknowledgement of the need for additionality in our sector appropriately, and as I say, in a modest way. So I don't think that we need to keep rehearsing that. That there is an acknowledgement, and it's felt more acutely with us. That's all I can say.
I understood, and I think both participants there have had the opportunity to set their position out. So Michelle, bring you in.
Let's follow that now. Thank you very much. I suppose just maybe picking up a little bit on what has been said. I mean, it's absolutely true there will have to be reforms to the system to accommodate the changes in school pupil numbers, and that'll have to take account of demand, and that's perhaps potentially why demand for integrated education is not being presented accurately, and why there's manufactured arguments here around this sector or this type of education wanting special treatment. I don't think that's true. I think you've made a really good case why it's different and why it needs additional support. And like the Chair, I definitely see the need for this bill and be supportive of it. I want to ask about sort of picking up a wee bit on what Kathy said, and just to home in on the idea that this being a piece of legislation is enough to get the workforce plan implemented. Have you any concerns that the bill will require the department to create and publish this workforce plan, but there's no real guarantee that actually will deliver it at the end?
I suppose, speaking personally, I note that when anything IM related is discussed either on the floor of the Assembly or in this committee, that we have started to see, or when research is published and when research is highlighted, we have started to see a little bit. That's why we ended up having a strategy. The strategy came off the back of the review of the review that stated the 2008 review of IME was sitting unimplemented. So I actually think that having these conversations is really helpful. I think it shines a light on the issues. I think that I'm just thinking, I'm not sure. I started off and I've written a note here, so please remind me if I haven't answered your question. But I think that having the conversations is healthy, having that acknowledgement, and I don't think it does any harm to shine a light on things and to make. I think when people know they have to come and report on anything, if they're coming in front of yourselves, if they're coming, if there's, I know in responses to questions that you ask, there's nothing worse than sitting here, believe me, there's nothing worse than sitting here and not having the answer to the question or not having anything of substance to show. So yes, of course, there's always that little bit of trepidation. What will it mean? Will it be lip service? Will we have a repeat and a rehash of the statutory duty? But I can reassure you that we will be all over that, and we will be keeping a close eye to that to ensure that actually what is coming out the other side. As David said, resources are absolutely tight. We don't have the luxury of spending, and that's something that the department has agreed on. We don't want to be in the space of the strategy. We don't want to be spending our time and limited resource on a process-driven piece that is not actually going to have impact and make a difference on the ground. So I think it's about ensuring that whatever we do is tangible, whatever we do, even if it is modest. And that's what I wanted to say. You know, we have no issue with moving a little bit at a time. We don't expect the world overnight. None of us can have the world overnight. But whenever we see that we're moving in the right direction, maybe the first, 18 months or whatever, it may not be what we need it to be, but if we can see the sparks of light, we're reasonable people, we're rational people, we can see, look, there's a commitment here, we're moving forward, it'll be better the next time, So yes, there is trepidation, but I do think that we can work together and that, we will absolutely do what we can to, but I do think there needs to be coordination of it. Because it's important that we put the limited resource we have in the right place.
At least it would be like a level of transparency that
absolutely
has weight and credibility in terms of what the needs are and whether they're being met or not.
And also, not to kind of rely on the headlines. What we do see an over-reliance sometimes on headlines, making it look like there's a lot happening. For example, the bursary piece for IME, yes, it's welcome, but it's not actually fit for purpose, and we're working with the department on that there's things we need to do in that space so that we're not come back to say, but we're doing something, because then we don't want to keep coming back looking like we're being unreasonable, but actually it's about getting rid of false narratives and making the process look like the impact. We need to make sure that what we're doing is tangible on the ground and that it is impacting for the betterment of the children sitting in the classrooms.
So the last question then, it's around the data available to measure the success. So it does say in the bill, I think it's clause 1.6, the workforce plan must set out measurable targets against which its effectiveness may be assessed. There's no real clarity though on what those measurable targets would be. So do you think there's enough data available right now to kind of baseline the workforce requirements? And do you think then there needs to be measurements in place to see that improve over time?
Yeah, so I'm just going to come in briefly and I'm going to ask Christine to come in just briefly on that.
I'd have to ask for it to be very brief.
So
there are more members looking to come.
I think we have in our paper the Ensuring Effective Teacher Supply. I know it's referenced in the bill 2023. We have continuously worked on amending that and adding to that because it's a changing picture, it's a fluid picture. So I think it's something that we will continue to do. I'm not sure if you wanted to say anything on data that,
So, Maria has already said that we have projections there for how many teachers we will need to appropriately supply Irish medium schools. I think data has come up a couple of times actually in recent Assembly debates or in recent Assembly discussions, and there is a narrative there that, and I would be very interested to, I have gone on myself on the Department of Education website to look at the improved intakes for ITE courses just over the last number of years. Because there is this talk about the protection for the Irish medium ITE places. Now, when I looked at this data, it looks for the most part that 580 ITE places are provided most years. 2023 and 2024, there was a dip to 567. Now, when I sort of punch through those numbers, we have 46 places for Irish medium intake across primary, PDC and BA Ed, and then the additional 8 spaces then for the post-primary, for the enhancement course. When I looked at the deficit there, or the decrease in ITE places, there were 13 less places, which makes up, a 2.24% difference, a decrease, which really, whenever I crunch the details, then is equivalent to 1 ITE place for Irish medium. So, although it was protected, 1.03 places, which I found quite interesting. Beyond that then, 2020, 2021, I know that a lot of this was based on the DFE skills barometer of 2019, but 2020 and 2021 there was actually additional places because of regrading of exam results. So, it did go up to 643, and that was across primary and post-primary. The 13 less places were actually 2 primary PDC and 11 less post-primary places, which we don't actually have a fit-for-purpose course for post-primary. So there has been a lot of talk about the data in Assembly discussions and Assembly debates, and actually when you crunch the numbers that are available on the Department of Education website, you know, it's equating to 1.03 people. Yeah.
And just on that, and just very quickly,
Yeah,
it's,
we really,
it's
really
really
are
important
against
not
it.
to skew that data, and you know, it has been stated as a preferential piece. It was one person. Yeah.
Important to note. Danny, you'd indicated.
Sure. Thank you so much. I suppose this particular minister, you know, when it comes to resources or budgets, you know, there's never a problem when it comes to his priorities. So I don't think these are being unreasonable at all. But for the ask for the sector, I'm just listening. I was a wee bit taken aback and said it's only at pillar 3 strategy. When the department was in, they do, and you have said that there's some positive worker, but they're almost like telling us it's almost flying. Everything's going really well. So how many meetings have taken place?
So the first, the strategy work began actually last April during Easter holidays, and there have been monthly meetings since that. Now, if you take out July and August for holidays, so I don't know if you want to. There's been about 12 or 13. I actually watched that the department at that day, and I don't know whether they just had miscalculated but it certainly is that I think the numbers were correct, but over the period of months was not accurate in my view. I think that was maybe May or April time, so it was a 12-month period, and they'd said maybe 6 months. So, yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot to do. I think even, you know, a year and a bit or 2 years by the time we get to the end of it is very ambitious, given we're talking about generational neglect here and the need to look at this properly. We're not going to get it done. I mean, how many meetings of the working group are per pillar? 3, is it? 4. 4 per pillar. So if you have 4 1.5-hour meetings on teacher supply, and you've got a wealth of people in the room and everybody has to have their say, it's not a lot. As a steering group, as I said, has met twice, which really concerns me, and I've had to push back on that, and actually the second meeting was cancelled initially and then brought forward, so we've met twice since September. I have asked for a series of meetings to be put in the diary because we need to keep moving at pace. It's a big ask, and we need to keep the momentum going. It's a concern, and I was concerned by, you know,
that really concerns me, because, you know, when they're saying that this is like, we don't need this bill and this bill will get in the way of what we're trying to do, and look, we're doing loads of meetings. Look, I don't know how many meetings we're having. When I ask the question, I take the information back to me in good faith. You know, I'm not completely said with that they've deliberately misled me or anything, but, you know, it gets the question answered and it gets them out the door. You know, that's really frustrating, and it's something that we can pick up as a committee going forward. How many of the meetings, well, don't say there's been that many, has the minister been to any of them?
No, the minister hasn't attended any of the meetings of either the working group or the steering group, and I have never been informed that the minister will ever be involved in those meetings. It's never been discussed. I don't think it formed part of the terms of reference either, so I haven't been expecting him. No, I'm not saying that it would be expecting to go to everything. It's just when you have people that get up, especially at the second stage of a debate on a principle of a bill, and be dead fast against it, and but also saying I have a strategy in place. I don't know how much engagement is there. That's another worry, and I don't think it's very fair on the sector, and this is why I started by saying it comes down to priorities. Everything comes down to priorities, and if it's not a priority for that particular minister, it's put on the long finger. But look, I thank you for the answers you've given me, and I can pick up on the other stuff. Yeah, I think, as you said, just very briefly, I know I'm getting daggers here, I agree with that, you know, and I did mention very briefly earlier area planning and the whole need for the rationalisation of school estate, and we hear so much about, you know, there are too many schools and but that hasn't been a priority lately. It hasn't featured within that space of Transform Ed, and you're thinking, you know, this is where the most money is being sucked out of the system, you know, schools that have empty desks, and that whole conversation is really money going into, come back to something Michelle said, and probably David, it's money going into the sustain, you know, to sustain 2 large sectors and 2 small sectors, ourselves and integrated. We're not getting any airtime, never mind oxygen or you know, any benefits from that. So yeah, I mean, it is concerning. And the other thing I want to say is, for too long, I think too often the strategy is being used as an answer for everything. And that's very concerning, because if we don't see it coming out, I don't know, is it something that we're going to work on really, proactively for 2 years, and then if nothing comes out, but in the meantime, we're not getting anywhere on anything, because we're doing a strategy. That's how we're focusing at the moment. So that's concerning.
Thank you, Maria. And Julie, you asked.
Well, thank you, Chair. Maria and Christine, thank you both for being here today. And you'll be aware I'm a fairly new MLA, so this has been really comprehensive for me. Thank you very much. I concur with David's comments, so I'll not re-rehearse them, and some of the questions that I was interested in have been asked already. And just to reassure you both, and I think I speak for all of my party, our priority is as young people and children, so it doesn't matter to me what language they learn in, as long as they're getting a good quality of education, and I certainly think that is the case for the Minister as well. But my question is in regards to retention. I was just really interested around those challenges, and I wanted to know, and it's okay if you don't know the exact data, but is it more prevalent in primary or post-primary, and have you any idea particularly why, aside from the pressures you have outlined?
Just briefly, thank you for the question again. I know that the attrition rates, so on paper we are training enough primary teachers, but only actually 40% of them are making their way into the sector. I'm not sure about attrition coming out of the sector once, beyond that 40%, if there's anything particular there, but workload is a massive piece across the board, of course, but primary it's particularly.
Yeah, and I think just picking up on the data piece, without with just those 8 places for post-primary, there's not a whole lot of data. We don't have a whole lot of data there, and I think picking up from what Michelle said, having a workforce planning bill would really open up that data. Would really, there would be a need for better tracking of data. We are working with the Irish Medium ITE provider at the minute. We are collaborating with them to track better. The graduates are under no obligation to let the ITE providers of the universities know where they've gone to or what they are doing. So because we are a smaller sector, it can be sort of easy anecdotally, through friends or through, a lecturer at the university. They may know where those people are, but they may not. So, any of the data, that's where it would be vitally important that we would have a workforce plan, moving forward.
And just you had said about, the quality is the most important bit, I suppose. Without a workforce, how can we ensure the quality of our our education system? And that's, I've heard some of our principals they're probably not, I'm not going to quote who they are, but saying, accommodation is something that we all struggle with, and we'll just have to get on with it. We always have. We cannot keep opening those doors without the staff there.
No, I absolutely do. I do understand. I'm not in any way being rude or anything.
No.
But I do work with other schools as well. And like, for instance, I know a school in Tyrone, and they're working with holes in the roof, and they're waiting for that to be remedied as well. So sometimes I think because we discuss things separately, you don't always get the overall picture, but I do take on board what you're saying, so thank you very much.
Oh my God, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So I think that's all indications. So thank you for your evidence. And look, I appreciate you're so passionate and in support of your sector. And I know there'll all probably always feel like there's more to be said, but we really appreciate your time today. So
thank you. Sorry for giving you a headache there.
Oh, you're all right. I'm well used to it, Maria. Don't worry about it. Thank you. So that I think brings that evidence session largely to a close. I did just want to float it on, maybe just for members to consider, and if the bill sponsor wanted to speak to it. It has been in my mind just potentially around if there is scope on an amendment, and it would very much come on in the spirit of enhancing the bill on this, around whether there would be any interest in looking in that consultee list in the bill, ensuring that the Education Authority are in there. I suppose it's just given that there has been a wee bit of a concern in the past that the department has, ticked boxes, but maybe not, embraced even the statutory duty and the full spirit of that duty. And also around the differing functions of the workforce, if there was maybe scope for an amendment to just specify including EA staff providing SEND support services. I think just so that we don't end up with a plan that this is about teachers, just not about the EA, because it's clear to me that is a real gap in the LITs and the EdSpsych. So I just wanted to float that to see if there was any committee interest in that in particular.
Certainly, absolutely, Chair. Anything that strengthens this bill or makes clear who has responsibilities around this. I mean, I'm more than happy to look at anything.
Could I suggest that if there's no opposition in terms of commissioning amendment advice just around in preparing the workforce plan in relation to who the department must consult with, and in terms of the differing functions of the workforce, if there was scope to specify that should include EA staff providing SEN support services, if members are in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Okay. I just think what I have picked up in the evidence is that there is certainly a perception from representatives of the Irish medium education sector that there has been a bit of a tick a box to say, well, we've done something, and I would just like to be clear that all of the evidence we've heard about what the sector is saying they need from this plan, it ends up in it, and that there's no scope to dodge it. So I think we're agreed on that. Okay, great. Okay, members, that takes us to item 11. I'm going to just reference this very briefly because it was sent by email just this afternoon, and it's the draft report into the committee's strategic review of current SEN innovation and transformation agenda. Conscious we heard substantial evidence today in relation to transitions, which won't be fully reflected in there. It's just to draw members' attention to it. It is very much a first draft, that it's just drawing together the work and the perspectives that we've heard so far. I'd like to thank the clerk and her team for the work to bring that together. I do just want to highlight in the section and recommendations, a lot of that was I had just sort of dropped everything with the clerk that I've been noting in terms of potential recommendations. I would want to suggest, and the clerk and I discussed it today, that it is likely, given that there hasn't necessarily been complete consistency from all stakeholders around where they think the main issues are, that we may want to consider in terms of recommendations that perhaps being a little higher level and focusing on one of the consistent themes I would want to draw out, I think, would be that there's a lot of work going on in the reform space, but almost consistently with every evidence session we've heard is that the concern is, what about the investment going into the services we actually have in the here and now, getting LITs right, getting early intervention right, getting the collaboration with health right. So I am in no way suggesting those recommendations go forward wholesale, but it's just to give you a flavour of what I had picked up as the evidence we've heard and the different recommendations that have come through. But I would suppose just suggest, unless anyone has particular comment, appreciate members may not have had time to read it, to begin feeding back to the clerk around if you're content with chronology from a factual perspective, the executive summary, and where we might land in terms of recommendations, because I think it would be important when we're bringing this to the floor of the Assembly that the recommendations are clear and easily articulated, if the members are all content with that. Agreed. Clerk, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Not really, just the executive summary, if you want to form it, it really gives a flavour of the rest of the report. So a lot of the report will be chronological and it will just be referring to the evidence that's been heard. So really, yeah, if you've got any comments on the executive summary and, as the Chair says, the recommendations, that would be really helpful in coming to a final draft.
Brilliant, and thank you for the work on that. Item 12, it is the Education Inspections Bill Committee consideration. So just refer members to page 122 of the main pack. It's the clerk's email to members on the Education Inspections Bill. Page 123 is the draft bill and its explanatory and financial memorandum. And page 125 of the main pack is an annex to the bill, which was it gives some background to the department's proposals when they first introduced the bill. So in your table pack, we have at page 39 a proposed timeline for the committee stage. We have a draft citizen space questionnaire at page 40, and we have a stakeholder list at page 53. So I'll invite the clerk in the first instance to speak to the papers, but we will be looking at agreement on the timeline, the notice for the papers, and the any additional names for stakeholder list. Over to you.
Yeah, so as you know, members, this is always a matter for you, and we try to give you a steer based on the various aspects of a committee stage and the Assembly recesses, and the various consultative and scrutiny tasks that the committee has to carry out. So we're going from today, the bill came out of plenary this week, so going from today, ordinarily the end of the committee stage would be, we would need, what would we say, the Business Office have said, the end of the committee stage, so commencing on the 2nd of June, 30 working days brings you up to the 8th of September 2026. A lot of that is in recess, so you would want to extend, and that's why we're in this zone. So if we put out signposting notice agreed today, we put that out on the 8th of June, next Monday. This timeline proposes that you would have the survey out until mid-September, so it leaves people a little bit of time before and after their holidays to engage, and then the committee would consider those submissions and finalise focus, invite oral witnesses starting from the 23rd of September. Then if you had 4 weeks of oral evidence, that would take you up to the recess for Halloween, and after Halloween then you would do your deliberation and consideration, any amendment work, and try to have the report ordered to be printed by early December, so bringing it in before Christmas recess. So what do you think of that?
No, that's great. Only thing I would just say, and again, I don't think it would necessarily require the stage to extend beyond that, but just whether or not it might be good to build in 1 or 2 extra weeks for the consultation. I don't know whether that would put other bits after that under a wee bit of pressure, just as it does land over a recess period. But if members are content that the time we have in June and the period in September would give particularly schools and school leaders time to respond, I'm content with that, but I'll open it up for discussion if there's any views.
Yeah, I've no difficulty with that, Chair. I mean, we're a busy committee. I mean, we're probably one of the busiest, and certainly between now and the end of the mandate. So I think we probably need to build in a bit of headspace there, but I'm open to suggestions.
I think if we work to the intention of delivering it but before we break up for the Christmas recess, and if we can bring it in earlier, obviously then, as we always do with our committee stages, I'm content to agree the timeline, unless there's any other views.
Do you want to extend the survey then until the end of September?
I think as long as we're confident that still gives us enough time for the other elements that are in there, if that could be worked around.
Yeah, so you would start your evidence taking then on the 30th of September, and that would be the same.
We have in previous sort of iterations of these started taking evidence while the consultation was still live, so we can do that, I think, to build in that space, but I just wouldn't want the committee to be open to criticism that we haven't particularly given teachers, school leaders, boards of governors, whoever might be, time to respond.
Yeah, I mean, it feels slightly more relaxed than what we've done before, but it's not really, because you're still wanting to progress it in time for it to get through plenary by March, so I don't know, do you have any other views, anyone?
Sorry, David.
I guess, how's it going to delay then the...
No, it shouldn't delay. I mean, basically...
No, we're not proposing extending the date. It's just in that timeline, I think building in more for the consultation, just overlap the evidence gathering. That's the only suggestion. I just think it's a common theme that we're criticised if we have consultations over a recess, particularly summer holidays when it's education related. So that's my only proposal.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to come back to me urgently and say, no, this is too long or whatever, do, but otherwise the team will put the papers out on Monday, so that would be call for evidence, the notice for the papers, the newspapers that's in your pack, and a survey, and it's typical for bills just to say, do you agree with the proposed clause? If not, is there any way that you would propose to amend that? And so we kind of try to keep it clause by clause. Okay. Is that all right?
So members agreed in terms of the table timeline, the notice going to the papers, and the stakeholder list. Are we all content to agree? Great. Okay, item 13 then on the agenda. Oh, sorry, apologies. Item 13 is correspondence. So as usual, summary note is provided for members, and that's at page 134 of your packs. Go through anything that requires committee discussion or decision, otherwise as per summary note. So item 13.2, page 136, correspondence from the Committee for Economy regarding the scheduled joint concurrent meeting on the 17th of June. Do members have any comment? I'd want to suggest we note. It all looks to be in order in terms of the themes we've agreed. Item 13.6, page 169, it's correspondence from the Department of Education regarding teachers' pensions overpayments. Do members have any comment or content to note? To note. Item 13.7, page 171, a reply from the Board of Governors at Wallace Prep School. You'll recall that we sought views of the Board of Governors following the receipt of correspondence from a parent regarding the case for change of Wallace Prep School. The chairperson of the board informs the committee that the case for change is now being considered by the EA and notes that the school is not meeting the relevant criteria of the Sustainable Schools policy, that there's capacity within the Greater Lisburn area to accommodate pupils should the need arise. Do members have any comment, or are we content to note, perhaps other than sharing with the original correspondent? Agreed. Item 13.10, page 177, correspondence from the Department of Education regarding SEND provision at St Paul's High School. Are we content to forward that to the individual who raised the issue? For agreed. Agreed. Yeah. Item 13.12, page 180, reply from the department regarding the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapist response to the SEND regs. I'd want to suggest that we forward that to the Royal College and add that to our evidence that we're gathering for the SEND regulation scrutiny, if we're agreed. Agreed. Okay. Item 13.13, page 182, the Department of Education's reply regarding the SEND regulations, providing the track changes comparison of the current SEND regs 2005 and 2026. The Department has also included a comparison of the 2021 consultation and the 2026 regulations. Again, would want to suggest that we add those to the evidence for the SEND regulations scrutiny. Are we agreed? Item 13.14, page 320, reply from the Department of Education regarding the automatic enrolment to free school meals for universal credit claimants, and the department provided a copy of its correspondence to Advice NI and Feeding Britain regarding free school meal eligibility. I would want to suggest that we note, and I would perhaps just add to that, I would note that progress on this is painfully slow, but other than noting, I'm not sure of any actions that arise, if we're agreed. Right. Item 13.15, page 323, is correspondence from an individual regarding an urgent SEN placement for their child. Members would wish to note that it is correspondence from a family who have been in touch with committee previously, so I would, in the same basis, seek members' agreement to forward that to the EA and seek that they make contact with the family directly, if that's agreed. Right. Item 13.16, page 325, is a reply from the Department of Education regarding the ITE bursary scheme following the recent briefing at committee by the panel from St Mary's Teacher Training College. The Minister states that the bursary categorically will only apply to new entrants with the intention of increasing applications and enrolments in the relevant subjects, and the Minister has also included withdrawal numbers as requested. Would note that the DE officials will meet with the panel as the committee had requested, but other than that, I would want to seek to share that correspondence with the panel who presented to committee, if we're agreed. Agreed. Yeah. Item 13.17, invite from the EA to the Being Well Doing Well event being held at Drumglass High School on the 19th of June and St Bernard's Primary School on the 23rd of June. I would suggest members would wish to add those dates to their diary and RSVP directly if they plan to attend. Are we agreed? Item 13.18, page 329, is from the Examiner Statutory Rules regarding delegated powers for the Education Holiday Meals Payments Bill. I think we have we have dealt with that and agreed a course of action. Item 13.19 at page 335 is an email from Save the Children regarding briefing the committee on the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill.
They're not coming today, everybody. That's what that says.
Okay. So we'll note that and include it in the bill papers if we're agreed. Item 13.22, page 98 of table papers, is a copy of correspondence to the Education Minister from the National Education Union regarding an implementation plan for the independent review of workload and the notice of intention to ballot for industrial action in a number of schools. I'm happy to hear members' comments, but I think we dealt with that at Chairperson's business and we're corresponding with the Minister on those issues if we are agreed. Agreed. Other than that, are we content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 134? Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, item 10, forward work programme, that's at page 341. So the committee office emailed members a list of dates for additional meetings due to the volume of legislation to be considered may potentially be required. Not all members have required, so I would ask any members who have not done so, I won't name and shame, but if they would potentially reach out to the committee office staff, that would be appreciated. Other than that, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest we note the forward work programme as drafted.
Yeah, I can just tell you that there's a Bunskull coming on the 24th of June, principal from Bunskull, Ben Madigan.
Okay. I would just note 24th of June will be
the last
rest
day.
up
Yeah,
really
yeah.
on a schedule. I think we would probably be maybe needing to be looking at agreeing a draft report at that stage. I would imagine we'd be very, very close to it. So just to draw members' attention that we are where we are going to be very pressed for time on that particular bill. Okay, are we content to note the forward work programme?
Yeah. Indeed.
Item 11, any other business? Seeking members' agreement that there's no other business. We agreed?
Agreed.
Item 12, date, time and place of next meeting. It's scheduled for Wednesday the 10th of June 2026, 2 p.m. in room 29 and online. Just remind members we have the Minister joining us. That is the only item on the agenda for next week. And on that basis, I will put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourned. Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee Room 29, sound.